Welcome everyone to the Place and Resources Scrutiny Committee meeting of Dorset Council on Thursday the 25th of March 2021. Welcome to members of the public watching this meeting. For the benefit of the public, I am Councillor Shane Bartlett, Chairman of this committee. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Council has put in place measures to enable the Council's decision-making processes to continue whilst keeping safe members of the public, councillors and council staff in accordance with the government's guidance on social distancing by applying new regulations issued by government for holding meetings from remote locations. This meeting is being live streamed to the public and recorded both by audio and video. Public participation will take the form of written questions as opposed to public speaking. Please can I remind all councillors to ensure that their mobile phones are switched to silent during the meeting. For the benefit of the public, I will now take a roll call to establish which councillors and officers are present. My Vice Chairman, Councillor Andy Canning.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Adkins.
Yes, here.
Councillor Heatley.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Parks.
Morning, Chairman. Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Roberts.
Yes, good morning, Shane. I'm here.
Councillor Rowe.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Shortell.
Present, Chairman.
Councillor Took.
Good morning, Chairman. I'm here.
Councillor Trite. Okay, thank you, members. The officers attending the overall agenda are John Selgren, Executive Director of Place, Jonathan Mach, Corporate Director of Legal and Democratic Monitoring Officer, Jim McManus, Corporate Director for Finance and Commercial, Lindsay Watson, Senior Democratic Service Officer, and Lillian Broad, the producer of the meeting. Other officers will be introduced for each agenda item. So I can move to item 1, apologies. Do we have any apologies, please, Ms Watson?
Chairman, no apologies for absence.
Thank you. Moving on to item 2, the minutes of the previous meeting of 25th of January 2021. Members, can I have your agreement that those minutes are a correct record, please? If there's no dissent, I'll assume they're approved.
Yes, happy with them.
Thank you, members. Declarations of interest. Does any member have a declaration of interest? Okay, I think I've got one to raise myself, that when we come to the request for a scrutiny request involving the local plan and the consultation process, just for transparency, I was a member of the AP that developed that local plan. Okay. If there are no other declarations of interest, then I'll move on to Chairman's updates, of which there aren't any. So item 5, public participation. And we've got quite a few questions this morning. They've been divided into two categories. So we have questions on the climate and ecological emergency strategy and questions on the Dorset office strategy, and I believe a highways question as well. So could I move first to the questions on the climate and ecology emergency strategy, please, and Ms Watson to read the questions.
Okay, Chairman, first question is from Councillor Josephine Parish, and her questions have been submitted as an individual councillor and not on behalf of Corfe Castle Parish Council. Question 1. When I opened my council tax bill this week, I felt disappointed to find that Dorset Council had yet again missed the opportunity to engage with every householder and business ratepayer on the climate and ecological emergencies (CEE). An information leaflet could easily have been added inside each taxpayer's envelope. This opportunity has been suggested regularly since 2019 to Dorset Council by Dorset-based climate and environmental advocacy groups. The inclusion in the council tax bill envelope comes with obvious cost savings on postal costs. A well thought through communications plan has even been presented to Dorset Council by one of these groups. These Dorset-based groups are demonstrating their keenness to help the council crack the challenge of engaging with this largely unengaged group of residents. Since COVID-19, Dorset Council have not held any genuine two-way public engagement on the climate and ecological emergencies. In contrast, these local groups and some parish councils have been holding virtual people's assemblies and virtual public meetings where the public can turn up virtually and have their say at the event live and without having to submit questions in advance. In terms of responses to the CEE strategy consultation, these unengaged people make up around 99% of the residents of Dorset. This is a huge challenge, but there is light at the end of the tunnel as these local groups are offering to help Dorset Council overcome this challenge. Given the response rate of less than 0.5% of residents that Dorset Council achieved in its consultation process, will the Scrutiny Committee recommend that Dorset Council work closely with Dorset-based climate and environmental advocacy groups and organisations, including parish and town councils, which are clearly able to reach and communicate with concerned residents more effectively and are working up ways to reach those residents who are largely unengaged with CEE? That's the end of the first question, Chairman.
Thank you. And I think we have Mr. Reeks to give the answer.
Thank you, Chairman. Dorset Council has undertaken an extensive programme of communication and engagement since the declaration of a climate and ecological emergency in 2019, and the consultation exercise itself was subject to one of the most prolific communication campaigns ever mounted by Dorset Council. Communication and engagement activities have included articles in the Dorset Council News magazine, delivered to every house in the Dorset Council area, online advertising, social media campaigns, call for ideas events, inquiry days, webinars for town and parish councils, and regular e-newsletters to over 30,000 recipients. The challenges of engaging with most residents around the climate emergency will remain, and it is everyone's responsibility to push the conversation into the wider public consciousness. That said, we appreciate the efforts of outside organisations to communicate the seriousness of the climate and ecological emergency. The Making It Happen section of the Strategy and Action Plan highlights several actions to ramp up communication and engagement activities over the coming years, with the aim of engaging with wider organisations and residents and encouraging behavioural change.
Thank you, Mr. Reeks. Next question, please, Ms. Watson.
Okay, question 2, which is also from Councillor Josephine Parish. In relation to the CEE strategy consultation results and recommended changes to the final draft report, does the Scrutiny Committee think it wise to use the quantitative analysis to conclude, brackets 10.2, open speech marks, that significant changes are not required to the strategy and action plan, close speech marks, when the detailed, informed and expert recommendations from a speech marks number of relevant partner organisations, brackets 9.8, clearly specify a wide range of significant changes are required? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Reeks to answer.
All responses received through the online consultation process have been analysed and included within either the quantitative or the qualitative analysis, and some key comments raised by specific organisations have been included in the main report, Appendix A. Due to the high level of net agreement, quantity of text comments and the detail of many of these responses, we have had to adopt a practical approach to including recommendations to the strategy and action plan. Dorset Council has to balance the responsibility of services the Council is responsible for in a way that is meaningful, practical and realistic. As a result, it is not accommodating all the suggested changes to the strategy and action plan, some of which were contradictory to others, as it would be unfeasible to do so without compromising its effectiveness, estimated budget requirements and realistic timeframe.
Thank you. Ms. Watson, next question, please.
Okay, the next question is from Vicky Elcote on behalf of Dorset Climate Action Network. Her first question is, the report to the committee recognises the low level of support for the 2040 and 2050 targets, but promises to move 90% of the way to net zero 10 years earlier. We welcome the statement in the paper to the Scrutiny Committee that The intention is to achieve an 80 to 90% reduction in emissions 10 years before these dates. When and how will we see the specific targets for the areas that will deliver that level of 80 to 90% carbon saving by 2030 for the Council's own operations, and how will they be scrutinised and monitored?
Thank you. Mr. Reeks, could you give the answer, please?
Specific carbon milestones are set out in the strategy document section, Carbon Budgets, Pathways and Trajectories, pages 21 to 22. This section sets a series of 5-year carbon milestones towards both the 2040 and the 2050 target. As yet unknown additional technological and funding opportunities, such as the Salix Fund, will become available over the course of the action plan, so it is impossible to track an exact path to carbon neutrality, and it is vital that there is the flexibility to react and adapt the plan to meet emerging opportunities. More detailed roadmaps setting out how each of the areas covered by the strategy can contribute to the overall targets will be published as part of the regular agreed 6-monthly reporting framework. These will be informed by some of the further investigative and planning work underway.
Hello, Dave. How are you doing?
Thank you, Mr. Reeks. Ms. Watson, next question, please.
Okay, question 2 from Vicky Elcote on behalf of Dorset Climate Action Network is as follows. Given that the report acknowledges the low level of public support for the 2050 target, which is the most significant in terms of delivery of the majority of carbon savings required, how will the targets set by other organisations who will deliver these savings be scrutinised and monitored by Dorset Council to ensure they are urgent and ambitious enough?
Thank you. Mr. Reeks to reply, please.
The strategy sets out the Council's roles and responsibilities to achieving a carbon neutral council and county. Dorset Council can have an indirect and influencing role in helping the county become carbon neutral by 2050, but has limited, if any, powers to enforce others to act. Setting of any mandatory standards for organisations to follow will need to come from central government. The Council can have a key role in encouraging others to take action by showing leadership, putting in place a positive policy framework where we can, and working with partners to facilitate behavioural change.
Thank you, Mr. Reeks. Ms. Watson, next question, please.
Okay, the next question is from Anne Rose Weiler on behalf of XR Dorset Advocacy. On behalf of XR Dorset Advocacy, I'm submitting the following question. Source of information is, and it's the Dorset Echo website of the 6th of March 2021. Question is regards to the specifics of how the £19 million Salix grant will be spent. This month, Dorset Council announced they had received £19 million of central government grant funding to help tackle the climate and ecological emergency. Dorset Council have expressed that the money will be targeted specifically at 4 areas. 1. All properties supplied by oil or LPG suitable for heat pump heating solutions. 2. Leisure centres eligible for advanced heat pump technology for pools and air handling, as has been installed at Gillingham. 3. A selected number of larger gas-supplied properties where heat pumps or hybrid heat pump solutions are suitable. These will include some larger offices and Tricuro sites. 4. Installation or upgrade of our building energy management system equipment across most of the estate, enabling improved or continued energy efficiency savings. It is expected that each project will change heating systems from fossil fuels to electric heat pumps, and backed up by energy reduction through improvements to building fabric, insulation, etc., and switching to LED lighting. Each building will also have renewable energy generation in the form of roof-mounted solar panels. Dorset Council also stated that all works under this grant must be completed and commissioned by September 2021, which is at most only 6 months away. Replacing heating systems is likely complex and takes time, often requiring the building or buildings to be shut down or at least parts to be out of action. Can the Scrutiny Committee establish how the £19 million is apportioned to each of the named projects? For example, how many millions for each of the 4 areas? And is there any contingency plan for spending some of the money on other projects, e.g. C&EE community initiatives, should it become apparent that the work cannot be completed in the required timeframe? Considering the recent rise in council tax, this could be felt to be a sensitive issue by Dorset taxpayers and may therefore carry reputational risk to Dorset Council.
Thank you, Ms Watson. Mr Reeks, could you reply, please?
The funding comes from a government grant programme, the Public Sector Decarbonisation Scheme, which sets strict criteria for how and when the funds need to be spent. September 2021 is the deadline set by this scheme to complete the work. A great deal of work is going on to plan this work to meet this deadline. The final spread of costs is still to be agreed, but will be roughly split 5.5 million for off-gas grid, 2 million for sports centres, 9.5 million for big on-gas grid buildings, 1.5 million for building controls. Money cannot be allocated to other things. It is based on a specific plan for a specific set of buildings that meet the criteria of the grant fund. If the money is not spent on those things in that time frame, it needs to be returned.
Thank you, Mr Reeks. Ms Watson, next question, please.
Okay, the next question is from Julie Ann Booker on behalf of Dorset Action. This is to do with due diligence to embed the CEE strategy across all strategies. In February 2020, Dorset Council adopted their overall council plan 2020 to 2024. During the consultation process, there was strong representation that having declared a climate and ecological emergency (CEE) in May 2019, one of the key priority themes for the Council's plan should be the CEE. Council decided that rather than being a separate priority, the CEE would be a cross-cutting theme included across the entire plan. Minutes of 18th of February 2020 full council meeting record that people were generally supportive of the 5 overall priorities, and following consultation, changes had been made to reflect that CEE was a cross-cutting theme that must be emphasised across the plan. The council plan, page 7, noted that in 2011, renewable energy produced in the Dorset area was only 1% of demand. By 2016, this had only risen to 5.5%. The draft CEE strategy has a specific action plan for renewable energy. One action is to lobby central government over the major hurdles to renewable energy deployment, the Navitas Bay decision, investment needed on grid infrastructure and future of heat. Another action is to work with renewable energy developers in Dorset to secure new renewable energy generation to meet and exceed needs of Dorset Council. Following consultation on the CEE strategy, the report being considered today makes no changes to either of these actions, having taken account of comments received during consultation. However, the draft local plan, recently out for consultation, states at 3.7.6, when refusing the proposed Navitas Bay Wind Park, the Secretary of State accepted that the proposals would change how the WHS World Heritage Site would be experienced or enjoyed in its surroundings, and so would have adverse implications for the site's significance and outstanding universal value. Consequently, how a development could adversely affect the use and enjoyment of the World Heritage Site will be a consideration when determining planning applications. This implies that Dorset Council is proposing, as part of the local plan, to oppose any offshore wind farms visible from the Jurassic coast, as well as any other development that affects the enjoyment of the coast. This seems to be in direct contradiction to the draft CEE strategy and illustrates that the draft local plan, surely a key council strategy, has not embedded the CEE strategy, so does not meet the clear requirements and framework of the overall council plan. And the question is Scrutiny Committee satisfied there are sufficient due diligence processes and links in place to ensure that all key strategies embed the CEE strategy? And if not, what recommendations will you make to rectify this?
Mr. Reeks to reply, please. Thank you, Ms. Watson.
Ensuring climate and ecological concerns are embedded at the heart of decision and plan making is identified in the strategy as a key objective. The Making It Happen action plan identifies a range of measures to achieve this, many of which are underway. Specific examples include climate change considerations on all committee reports, integration into Council's performance management framework, embedded in service planning and procurement strategy and processes, considered in key strategies and development of a climate impact tool. The strategy and action plan will also be subject to 6 monthly monitoring, which will be published as per results of consultation and will be reviewed by the Policy and Oversight Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Reeks. Ms. Watson, next question, please.
Okay, the next question is from Andrew Carey. A number of responses to the Climate and Ecological Emergency Strategy consultation, including the collective response from Dorset Climate Action Network and the response from Char Valley Parish Council, called for Dorset Council to champion local ideas, initiatives and knowledge in order to create a vision for Dorset and position itself as a visionary and far-sighted climate progressive authority. In this way, the council could engage with the public, galvanise action by local businesses and individuals, and create momentum for change. Does the Scrutiny Committee agree that the report on the Climate and Ecological Emergency Strategy consultation results and recommended changes (brackets agenda item 8) misses a very important opportunity to adopt this very low cost idea?
Thank you, Ms. Watson. Mr. Reeks to reply, please.
As work continues on the delivery of the action plan, the suggestions raised through the call for ideas exercise and the consultation will be further considered. Ideas such as this will be considered with others in relation to the wider communication and engagement activities to deliver the strategy.
Thank you, Mr. Reeks. Ms. Watson, next question, please.
Okay, the next question is from Dr. Sandra Reeve. On page 103 of the report, informed organisational response reveals that the proposed action on the climate emergency is not matched by action on the ecological emergency. For example, Dorset Wildlife Trust is quoted as saying, "The action plans have a column for CO2 saving, but nothing for ecological gain. There is no ecological equivalent to the section Action Against Climate Change, which runs from page 16 to 17, or Carbon Emissions and Achieving Net Zero, page 18 to 20, or Carbon Budgets, Pathways and Trajectories, page 21 to 22. Does the Scrutiny Committee think that this is an admissible omission within a climate and ecological strategy and action plan in 2021? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Watson. Mr. Reeks to reply, please.
Carbon dioxide emissions are recognised as one of the key contributors to global climate change, which in itself is one of the root causes for ecological decline. The need to reduce carbon emissions is the key drive behind government statutory 2050 targets, and there are well-defined mechanisms in place to measure and monitor progress on the reduction of emissions. Overall, a wide number of actions within the strategy will not only reduce emissions, but will also have ecological benefits and contribute to ecological net gain, as noted by the co-benefit symbols within the action plan. At the current time, there is no standard mechanism for measuring or monitoring progress in tackling the ecological emergency, as it is incredibly difficult to measure success as a single factor similar to carbon emissions reduction, especially over such a wide and diverse area as Dorset.
Thank you, Mr. Riggs. Ms. Watson, next question, please.
Okay, the next question is from Kaz Dennett. The C and EE consultation results and recommended changes to final draft says the lowest level of positive net agreement was around the target dates of 2040 and 2050, although when the results from the short survey are included, the level of support dramatically increases. Some respondents questioned the urgency of the targets and suggested that the date should be moved forward, brackets 9.10. First point, long survey, do you agree with the target? Second bullet, short survey, Dorset Council wants to be carbon neutral by 2040. Do you think it is a great idea? This latter question leaves no room for a respondent to say it is a good idea in principle, but the target date is wrong. It is commonly bad practice in survey design to ask leading questions that state a desired position or outcome. The Market Research Society, which is a professional body for research, insight and analytics, gives very clear guidelines on this. Page 19 of the MRS Guidelines for Questionnaire Design. There is then a link to a website for that information. Researchers should take particular care to ensure that participants are not led to a particular answer. Positive phrases such as the proposal is a good idea in a question without a balancing negative phrase may lead the participant to a positive view of the proposal under consideration. The poor questionnaire design of the short survey places a question mark over the reputation of Dorset Council to be able to seek public opinion in a fair and balanced way. By the Council's own admission, the results from the flawed question in the short survey significantly changed the outcome of the consultation with regard to the target dates by which the Council and the county should be zero carbon. Does the Scrutiny Committee recognise that the conclusion in the report is invalid because the two surveys ask significantly different questions and the short survey question is leading and biased according to opinion research guidelines?
Thank you, Ms. Watson. Mr. Riggs to reply, please.
The purpose of the short survey was to engage a wider audience, particularly young people, to get a snapshot of views and primarily to engage greater uptake of the formal online consultation. Though the results of this shorter survey are useful in helping us formulate our ongoing approach to climate change, they were not considered as part of the formal consultation process and are not included in the results of the consultation. The short survey has not yet been closed. Prior to the closure of the consultation, it was made clear at the end of the short survey that if participants wish to provide additional information, they could follow the links provided to take part in the formal consultation process.
Thank you, Mr. Riggs. Ms. Watson, next question, please.
And the second question from Kaz Dennett is, in the graph titled Overall Net Agreement, brackets all questions, on page 5 of the consultation response report, the net agreement for the target dates is significantly lower than that for all other aspects of the strategy and action plan that have used a quantitative measure. Reliance on net agreement scores masks the true public response. A great many respondents indicated that they agreed with the Council's approach, whilst calling for changes, amendments especially to target dates. Given the comparatively low net agreement for the target dates of zero carbon for Dorset Council by 2040 and 2050 for Dorset overall, and the highly questionable design of the short survey, which led participants towards a positive response, will the Scrutiny Committee ask why Dorset Council concludes the target dates will remain as 2040, Dorset Council itself, and 2050 for the wider Dorset area, and recommend they bring the dates forward?
Thank you, Ms. Watson. Mr. Riggs to reply, please.
The results of the short survey are not included in the net agreement comparisons. The net agreement scores are a recognised way of interpreting survey data and rightly conclude that against the binary questions around agreement with the target dates, the majority of respondents chose to agree or strongly agree as the basis to leave any further comment, as opposed to disagree or strongly disagree. The strategy sets out targets which the Council feels are realistic and achievable, but notes there is a clear intention to achieve these targets earlier if at all possible. The strategy also sets a number of interim targets for 2025, 2030 and 2035 as a carbon budget, and the intention is to achieve an 80 to 90% reduction in emissions 10 years before these dates, reflecting the difficulty and expense of tackling the last 20%.
Thank you, Mr. Reeks. Ms. Watson, next question, please.
Okay, the next question is regarding the agenda item 9, Dorchester office strategy. The question is from Mary Calvert. Southwark's House is central and accessible with good public transport links, whilst County Hall is relatively hidden away, remote and inaccessible. In the Equality Impact Assessment, what public access problems have been identified for 1. The physically impaired, 2. The partially sighted and blind, 3. The hearing impaired and deaf? Are you satisfied that these have been given sufficient attention and weight in this proposal?
Okay, have an officer reply, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Based on independent assessments, an extensive programme of surveying and work was carried out within County Hall by predecessor councils, following the introduction of the Disability Discrimination Act 2005, which has now been superseded and incorporated within the Equality Act 2010. The Council has continued, where necessary, to make reasonable adjustments since that time, based on representations made and any complaints received in accordance with the legislation. As part of the rationalisation and consolidation exercise currently being undertaken across its estate, the Council has commissioned a further programme of access audits and reviews of its proposed primary office locations, some of which are also accessible to the public, to ensure that all barriers to access have been recognised and an action plan established where necessary and reasonable in order for them to be reduced and removed. Any actions arising will be recorded and remedied as part of a planned programme of repair and maintenance works. It should be noted with regard to Dorchester in particular that a customer access point will also be retained within the library. Given that we are commissioning and undertaking a fresh series of access audits using a community interest company established by disabled people, older people and carers whose work is informed by the social model of disability, we believe that we are paying sufficient attention and weight to ensure we meet the reasonable needs of those that may be physically impaired, partially sighted and blind, and with a hearing impairment and deaf.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Ms. Watson, next question, please.
The next question is from John Calvert. I have been a resident of Dorchester for 10 years now and have appreciated the building of Southwark's House, putting facilities in a central position in the town. Indeed, I attended a meeting of the Shadow Unitary Council in that building and asked if the council was going to rely on its staff expertise or spend money on consultants, and was assured the former. In item 9, the council mentions the use of In item 9, the council mentions the use of 3 consultant firms at least looking at various aspects of the proposals. 1 to look at Cullerton Park and 2 others to look at Southwark's House, so no overall advice. My question is, how much will the council pay for these reports? Because the cost is not obvious in item 9. Surely the council is spending our money to learn how to spend more money.
Thank you, Ms. Watson. Mr. Thompson to reply.
Thank you, Chairman. A number of specialist property agents were commissioned to provide an insight into particular aspects of the property market, e.g. residential, office, health, etc., in order to help determine trends, changes and movements in the marketplace and the potential uses of the buildings. This advice and guidance would provide councillors with an independent view of and advice on market conditions, together with the necessary assurance that a range of options are being considered and assessed in order to reach the conclusions and recommendations contained within the report. The cost of such an exercise was less than £25,000, and given the financial significance of the recommendations being considered, it was believed that this represented value for money.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Ms. Watson, next question, please.
Okay, the next question is from Helen Sumbler with regard to the Local Transport Plan. Local Transport Plan 3, brackets LTP3, Implementation Plan 4 was due to be published in April 2020 to cover 2020 to 2023. As a resident who has worked in public transport for over 38 years, and given that transport accounts for the highest percentage of carbon emissions by both Dorset Council and the county as a whole, that the Dorset Local Plan includes commitments to focus travel onto active travel and public transport options, and critically, that the draft climate and ecological emergency strategy states, in terms of progress so far, that Dorset's local transport plan already demonstrates a strong commitment to sustainable transport policies and carbon reduction. Could I ask the Scrutiny Committee to explain why it is acceptable that no current implementation plan exists for LTP3 and what actions are being taken by Dorset Council in conjunction with BCP Council to address this significant omission?
Thank you. I believe I have Councillor Bryan to answer.
Yes, good morning, Chairman. Instead of writing an implementation plan for an old local transport plan written by predecessor councils, Dorset County Council and Bournemouth and Poole Borough Councils, which I add no longer exist, Dorset Council with BCP Council has begun work on one new joint local transport plan for 2022 through to 2038 to align with the two new local plans for Dorset and BCP. During 2019 and 2020, Dorset Council has been putting their resources into planning, designing and delivering the following projects which demonstrate our continuing strong commitment to sustainable transport policies and carbon reduction as outlined in the local transport plan. 1. The Transforming Cities Fund TCF programme, a £100 million package of sustainable transport schemes across South East Dorset, including footway, cycling, public transport access improvements. 2. Creating a new electrical vehicle charging network of 80 charge points across the county to help encourage the switch to electric vehicles to reduce vehicle emissions. 3. Responding to the COVID-19 pandemic by ensuring social distancing measures were delivered in our towns to keep people safe while encouraging our businesses to reopen. This included widening footways, providing sitting out areas for cafes and restaurants, and providing cycleways, etc. 4. Working on the council's travel plan and fleet review to ensure the council's emissions are reduced. 5. Providing the transport input and the climate and ecological emergency strategy. 6. Gathering transport evidence for the new local plan to create a transport strategy to align with future development and infrastructure needs. And last but not least, delivering footway and cycleway enhancements to encourage active travel across Dorset, for example, Ham Lane, Ferndown Cycleway, Institute Road, Swanage Town Centre enhancements, including footway widening, removal of redundant railway lines and the resurfacing of the carriageway in Commercial Road Weymouth to improve cycle safety. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bryan. Ms. Watson, second question, please.
Okay, the second question from Helen Sumler is, could I also ask how work is progressing to produce an updated rights of way improvement plan? The existing Dorset County Council plan runs from 2011 to 2021. And when this new plan might be published.
Thank you. Councillor Bryan to reply.
Yes, thanks, Chairman. The Environment Advice Team are currently working on the revised Rights of Way Improvement Plan to ensure it captures all the relevant opportunities for the development of the rights-of-way network, especially in light of the emerging climate and ecological emergency. This advice, and sorry, Chairman, I'll go back, which demonstrates our I do apologise, Chairman. I'm going to go back to one line. In fact, I'm going to read it all again so we don't have any confusion.
That's quite all right.
The Environment Advice Team are currently working on the revised Rights of Way Improvement Plan to ensure it captures all the relevant opportunities for the development of the Rights of Way network, especially in light of the emerging climate and ecological emergency strategy and action plan. Dorset Council intends to start gaining evidence from others in April, May, and produce a draft consultation later in the year. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bryan. Ms Watson, next question, please.
Chairman, I think we've come to the end of the public questions section.
Okay, thank you. So thank you, officers, for partaking in that public questions, please. Thank you for the answers that have been given. If I now move to item 6, Draft Place and Resources Scrutiny Committee Forward Plan. So we have an overview of the committee forward plan. I should advise members of the committee that there is going to be an informal session of the committee to look at the forward plan, because there is a chairman's and vice chairman's scrutiny overview committee meeting later this afternoon, when those forward plans are going to be heavily populated. So we will form an informal session for the members of the committee to look at those forward plans, to make comment on them at a later date. Thank you. Is there anything you wanted to highlight at this particular time, Ms Watson?
No, it was really just to maybe set out the sort of proposed items for your next meeting on the 11th of May. We've got an item on grid capacity, a scoping paper to see if any further review is required, and some monitoring in terms of the property strategy and asset management action plan. So you've got those two proposed items at the moment, but obviously there's going to be discussion at the chairs meeting, and like you just said, we're going to have the informal session. So obviously there is flexibility within your programme.
Thank you, Ms Watson. So if we
Chair,
can move.
Councillor Tuck has indicated he wishes to say something.
Thank you, Councillor Canning. Councillor Tuck.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to go back to the responses to some of the questions. The questions were asked, most of them, along the lines of, does the Scrutiny Committee, or will the Scrutiny Committee, and the answer was expected from the Scrutiny Committee. Most of the questions were then answered by officers, and I, as a member of the Scrutiny Committee, had not been aware of those answers or what they were going to be. So are those answers by officers actually answers from the Scrutiny Committee? And if so, what have we signed up to? I don't understand why, if a question is asked to the committee, the answer is devolved to an officer who then answers it without reference to the committee.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tuck. Those questions have been given a corporate answer at the moment, but obviously as members of the Scrutiny Committee, you can now look at those questions, and if you think there's relevant points, then you can put that, you can request to have that put onto the forward plan for the Scrutiny Committee. It wasn't a point that was missed by myself, and so it will be members of the committee to look at those questions and those answers, and if there's any relevance there to the committee members, then they can request for those topics to be put on the forward plan. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Chairman, it's Lindsay. Is it just worth also adding, obviously, the majority of the questions received from the public for this session are with regard to agenda items on your agenda for today's meeting. So obviously it's for members to sort of take all those comments and questions on board whilst you're having your debate on those items.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Ms Watson. Okay, so if I can move to the second part of agenda item 6, which was a scrutiny request from Councillor Rowe. You will have all seen it in your agenda papers for a review of Dorset Council's local plan consultation exercise. Could I invite Councillor Rowe, should she wish to say something at this point?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The climate change and ecological emergency consultation process are about to be scrutinised by this committee because it reflects a high level of concern. The same can be said of the local plan consultation. The topic is of high local concern. The issues are ones that the committee can influence, and they are narrow enough to have an impact. The issues are relevant to the whole of Dorset, and the review would be in the council's interests. I ask that the Place and Resources Committee scrutinise the consultation process because it is one of the most important consultations which will affect the residents of Dorset for years to come.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Members will be aware that the position statement on Dorset Council's local plan is on pages 19, 20, 21 and 22. The next person I have to speak is Councillor Walsh, portfolio holder for planning.
Thank you, Chairman. I could speak on this for a very long time, and I'm sure people are fed up with me saying all the things that I've said because I just seem to repeat them, whether it's on the radio or on the television, or whether we're talking to the parish councils. It possibly would be good at some stage to look at the scrutiny of this consultation, because we think this has been the best consultation it could possibly have been. We've reached more than 2.5 million people, had more responses, and this is quite complicated to explain. We've had more responses with this consultation than putting all of the previous local plan district consultations together ×3. This has been quite incredible. And the best thing I think is that rather than we normally get a certain part of the demographic of the area, which is normally older people commenting on planning issues with this, we're actually hearing from younger families. And I think it's fantastic. The thing is, I took this to Cabinet on the 8th of December, this consultation document, and that was the call-in time. That wasn't done at that time, so there is no call-in available at present. But I think that people should realise how absolutely brilliant we've done this. I would like to thank all the planning people for all the work that they've done and working closely with the town and parish councils. And I mean, you said that you helped to develop the plan, Chairman, being on the EAP. I'm sorry to contradict you. We were there to steer and guide the local plan. Now, I would like to say, because a certain person has asked, could they be on the EAP because they have local interest? There are 82 members who have local interest. And if they were all speaking on their local areas, then that meeting would go on until the whole of Dorset is covered in concrete. If you will remember and back me up on this, Chairman, for the first 3 meetings, I quite meanly teased you because you would talk about your local area. And I told you time and time again, we were not there to be parochial and talk about our own local areas. These were big things to discuss, and it was about Dorset. We were not a decision-making body, so if anyone thinks we were making decisions behind closed doors, we weren't. The reason it was confidential is because it was very difficult for people to have those conversations and talk about areas without those people from those areas being present and contradicting or whatever. It would have gone on forever. We were guiding and steering officers. If you remember, Chairman, one of the last things we looked at, and this keeps raising itself, is a new settlement or a new town in Dorset. And we asked officers at the time to go away and look at all the areas this was possible. And that's what they're doing. We guide and we steer. We don't make decisions. We didn't develop this plan. So I do not see the benefit. We have legal, obviously, on this. And I do not see the benefit of a scrutiny on this. And it can't be called in, as we said, because it's past that date. But we are working. I would pull my hair out, Chairman, if I had some. But these conversations, I've spent the last 3 years trying to get people in Dorset to work as one. This is our Dorset. The council, the organisations, the public, we should all be doing this together. And wherever I go, there seems to be an us and them. I go to all of these public meetings and it seems to be us and them. It's not us and them. We are working with the people of Dorset to deliver the best outcomes for Dorset, which is what we all want. Now, people have come up and they've said they wanted the extension to the consultation. I would like to tell people, In the statement of community involvement, the consultation was supposed to be 6 weeks. We extended it to 8 weeks. There was an extension. What people don't seem to realise is that developers, architects, and so were not on furlough. They've been working hard in their offices at home and in business. And if we don't get a local plan up together as soon as possible, we have no defence against speculative development. One of the areas we previously had was Purbeck and the Swanage area, which had a 5-year housing land supply. It no longer does. And as you know, Chairman, at the last planning meeting, 2 developments that they didn't want went through because they have no 5-year housing land supply and cannot evidence a housing delivery test. It's because of those reasons we now need, as soon as possible, a local plan. It's the only defence we have. If we don't design the future of Dorset, developers will. And people are arguing the numbers, the housing numbers, all of those sorts of things that I've looked up on this scrutiny. Government has told us that's the number. It's not for debate, not for discussion. We have to deliver that number. Now, Chairman, I can go on forever and ever. You know I can, and I will. But people have heard all of this before. So unless you want to go to legal and find the legal approach to this, then I'll shut up unless you wish me to say further.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. I am going to Jonathan Mayer, the Monitoring Officer, next. Thank you. Mr. Mayer.
Thank you, Chairman. The scrutiny request from Councillor Rowe has 2 desired outcomes, to improve future consultation and to extend the local plan consultation period until the summer. And I'm afraid that it's too late now for Councillor Rowe to achieve her second desired outcome of extending the local plan consultation period, and I'll explain why. The decision to approve the local plan consultation was an executive decision made by the Cabinet. That Cabinet decision was susceptible to call-in, which would have frozen the Cabinet's decision to enable you to undertake scrutiny, but call-in is strictly time limited. The Cabinet made its decision in December. A decision notice was published on the 10th of December, and that gave councillors until 17th of December to call in the Cabinet's decision. That didn't happen, and so the Cabinet's decision, which was not just to conduct scrutiny of the local plan, but to change the statement of community involvement to reflect consultation in a pandemic, that decision now stands, and it's not constitutionally within your powers now to undertake scrutiny with a view to extending the consultation period. Chairman, the first desired outcome though was to improve future consultation, and I think the council would always want to improve future consultation. But what I would urge you against is undertaking consultation scrutiny of the local plan consultation while the local plan process is live. That's quite a dangerous thing to do. But on the main point, extending the local plan consultation period and undertaking scrutiny to achieve that is not within the Constitution. I'm afraid it's too late to do that now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a number of people that are requesting to speak. Then from your legal standpoint, am I able to take those questions from members? Mr. Mayor.
Sorry, Chairman, I've had problem with the connection then.
Okay, in light of what you've just said about it is not correct for this to be scrutinised at this time, I have a number of members who wish to speak. Can I take those questions or not?
But by all means, Chairman, I'll do my best to answer them.
Thank you. Councillor Rowe, would you like to go first?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can I ask why a town council had the time limit extended by over a week?
Can I answer that one, Chairman?
Yeah, please do.
Councillor
Sorry, it was not. I didn't extend any time for any town council or parish council. What I said was, if there were any late submissions, they would not be discounted. That is not the same as extending. I didn't extend it further than the 8 weeks. I just said we would not refuse any late submissions.
Well, I had 3 residents who missed the deadline because one lady has a new baby. She's trying to run a business. She missed the deadline, and I wasn't aware that she could have made a late submission. Nobody told me that.
Okay, thank you. Can I move to Councillor Gray?
Yes, thank you, Chair. My question, it may come across as a bit naive, and I appreciate your patience, but it's about consultation in general. Is it normal for councils to have some sort of external scrutiny of consultation? We are using consultation, rightly so, to guide us in what we do, but I don't necessarily see any external scrutiny of consultation results, and I wondered whether that was normal practice. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor, could you answer?
Chairman, I'm sorry, I'm not aware of whether it is usual practice in particular instances to use external support to review consultation outcomes. We do have consultation expertise internally within the council, though.
Thank you. Does that satisfy you, Councillor Gray?
Partly. I was coming from the point of externally scrutinising from the basis of accuracy rather than expertise, so we could defend ourselves against the charge of it being accurate or not. But I'll do some more research and come back to you if I may. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Next up is Councillor Took.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the terms of reference of this scrutiny committee, the first item is this committee shall challenge, review or scrutinise the decisions or actions taken by the Cabinet. It then goes on in separate sections to talk about call to account process and call for action. But I'm curious as to where the time limit on the ability of this committee to challenge, review or scrutinise decisions or actions by Cabinet is in Constitution. The Constitution is a long and complex document, but I couldn't see specifics on that, whereas there may be on call to account or call for action.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Chairman. Yes, those are the committee's terms of reference. The committee exercised those terms of reference within the executive procedure rules and within the scrutiny procedure rules, and that is where those time limits are detailed. Call-in in particular is subject to a strict time limit because the Cabinet makes a decision in public, and then we publish a decision notice setting out what the Cabinet's decision was. We send it to councillors, and there is a 5-day cooling off period during which the Cabinet's decisions cannot be acted upon. And during that 5-day cooling off period, councillors are able to call in a Cabinet decision for formal scrutiny. And what I'm saying is that 5-day cooling off period expired without any calling notice having been given. If there was to have been a call-in, that should have happened by the 17th of December, and it did not happen.
So are you saying that the Scrutiny Committee's ability to challenge decisions or actions taken by Cabinet has to be done within the call-in procedure or the call for action procedure?
Yeah, I'm saying
that's not clear. That's not clear.
I'm saying that in this case, absolutely, because we have the desired outcome of this particular request for scrutiny is to extend the local plan consultation period. That's expressly contrary to the decision that was made by the Cabinet, and which there was an ability to challenge within the calling period.
So if the desired outcome was that we challenged the Cabinet, that their decision was poor, would that have been possible?
There are a range of possible different desired outcomes that could be brought forward. One of them brought forward by Councillor Rowe is to improve future consultation, and something general like that is something that the committee could legitimately do at the right time. Not while a consultation is live and ongoing, and whilst there are potentially people out there who might wish to challenge that consultation.
So the only reason we can't discuss it now is because of that second line in the desired outcomes.
It would depend, in this particular case, yes, it would depend then what the alternative desired outcome was, because that might equally be fall foul of the requirement that calling is strictly time limited.
It might simply be to improve consultations in the future.
In which case, Chairman, that would be a reasonable thing for this committee to do at an appropriate time, not while the local plan consultation, so not while the local plan process is live and running. But if you want to improve consultation generally, and there will be a whole range of consultations ongoing in the future, that's a perfectly legitimate thing for this committee to do.
Agreed, Mr. Mayor. I spoke to Mr. Selgren just about that, about actually this committee possibly looking at consultation process over the entire authority on how it consults with the public and other stakeholders, and that is possibly a piece of work we can bring to scrutiny in the future. Thank you, Councillor Took. I've now got Councillor Kimber.
Thank you, Chair. It's really is to make the point that of Councillor Rowe's point about the consultation. I don't think any of us at the moment are trying to say nobody didn't work hard or nobody didn't do a great job during the consultation. I experienced the same, no matter, as you might say, as a ward councillor, we had to do a lot of work to get get it around our various wards to say we've only got 8 weeks, and we're not asking for, you know, when Councillor David Walsh says the whole of Dorset would have been concreted over. No, we're not asking for months. It would be just a bit more time. It just felt at that moment that 8 weeks was a little rush. Now I realise we did extend it, but it just felt that it was a bit rushed, and I would take some of the points that we do need to look at this consultation a bit more. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kimber. Councillor Trite.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't seem to be able to get the video on. Anyway,
it's okay, we can hear you.
Yeah, that's fine. There was a position statement put up before us, which was put there in connection with Councillor Rowe's suggestion, and my question is with respect to that position statement, if I may. It's the position statement on the local plan progress, starting on page 19, as you've, I think, already indicated. And I'd like to quote from it. It says, "We do not currently believe that there are exceptional circumstances to justify taking a different approach from the standard methodology, that is, the standard methodology for determining housing numbers." Now, I must say that if our Dorset circumstances are not exceptional, I have difficulty knowing what circumstances would be. I'm afraid that the position statement as it is does amount to a counsel of despair. When I say council, I mean council, not council, a council of despair. Testing this out will always be a risk. It makes the point that testing is a risk, but it always will be a risk. But the alternative is the present most unsatisfactory way in which numbers are determined. So can anyone tell me, I don't know whether this should be addressed to Councillor Walsh or whoever, but can anyone tell me what would constitute exceptional circumstances that would justify taking a different approach from the standard methodology? Can I be given any examples of what would constitute exceptional circumstances? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Try. I will go to Councillor Walsh first. I'm just looking through the participants list to see if I have a planning officer here. I think the closest I've got to it is Mr. John Selgren. So, Councillor Walsh, do you want to answer first? And I'll go to Mr. John Selgren.
Well, actually asking for examples, I can't give examples specifically. What I can say is that looking at the numbers that government has stipulated, looking at our own district-wide local plan numbers that we had, there is not very much difference between the numbers that we had and the numbers that government have said, no matter what any organisation to the contrary is saying in the press. Some of those figures are just not right. I would like to say one point in this. Whatever the standard methodology is on the day of examination is the one we have to adhere to. That number, because they're reviewing the white paper, that number could be higher on that day, in which case we'd have to have extra allocations. It could be lower, in which case we could drop allocations. But until that day, we have to keep working at pace, or we're never going to get this on time. Because there is so much still to do for us. And regardless of the numbers, yes, we don't like the numbers. Challenging the numbers, we can't exactly challenge the numbers when our draft local plan can deliver those numbers. We can prove we can do it because it's in the plan. And more numbers than are necessary, because we've had to do that as well in case we have to help any outside or neighbouring authorities. Now, I know some people don't like those numbers, and I've said they're not done through local policy, they're national policy. I've been travelling the whole county telling people, if you don't like these numbers, contact your MP to get the standard methodology changed. We cannot change the standard methodology. And I know that wasn't the question, but I'm trying to answer it as there isn't anything exceptional with regards to how we can say, no, we can't deliver this, because we've shown we can deliver it. And we'd look pretty foolish if we said now that we can't.
Thank you, Mr. Councillor Walsh. I'm fully aware that in terms of actually not delivering on the methodology, that the central government request is very difficult to try and dispute the figures. Mr. John Selgren, are you able to add anything to this? Or
Thank you, Chairman. John Selgren, Executive Director of Place. I've got anything to add to Councillor Walsh's specific comments on the particular matter. I think on the wider principle, if I understood correctly, the conversation that you just had, you have agreed as Chairman that you would like to include on the work programme a discussion about the Council's consultation process in the round. It would seem to me, and my advice to you and the committee would be, that would perhaps be the appropriate place to have that full and more comprehensive discussion when you can have the materials in front of you to have that consideration.
Yeah, that is my view, Mr. Selgren. Yeah, I think we've done, obviously within the reports we've got in front of us, we've had a very big consultation exercise in terms of the climate emergency paper that we've got before us later, and of course this has been over the local plan, a big consultation exercise as well. So I think it would be prudent at some point in the future to have that consultation processes and what we've learned from that to come before scrutiny. I think we'd be in a good position then to have a look at it, see what worked, what didn't work, and how well we've done or how well we haven't done. So is that okay? Thank you. I've now got Councillor Heatley.
Thank you, Chair. You've just said the first thing I was going to say. It seems to me that it's manifest. We should at some stage scrutinise particular consultation exercises, or indeed them exercising in general. And I doubt whether anyone on this committee is going to disagree with that. The second point about the length of the consultation, Jonathan Mayer has proved to me that even if we voted for this document, it wouldn't achieve the effect of lengthening this particular consultation. As it happens, I'm fairly sympathetic to Councillor Walsh's proposition that we really have to get on with this, being on a couple of planning committees and seeing some of the things we're being forced to agree, kind of concentrates your mind. And I do think we need to get on with it. However, if we can kind of agree we are going to scrutinise consultation processes in the future, and if Councillor Walsh would be willing to make a rather better publicised statement that he'd be willing to receive further comments for the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, that's up to him, then perhaps we could just move on.
Thank you, Councillor Heatley. Councillor Walsh, did you have anything to say about that?
No. I understand where Councillor Heatley is coming from, but I'd hate to confuse matters. We did not actually say. Let me go back to the way you can respond to these. You can respond to the actual electronic paper on the web, but you can also respond by letter to South Hawks House. I mean, that's why it was a case of we would not have a cut-off point specifically on one certain day, because they were coming in at different ways. So it wasn't a case of I didn't agree anybody could have an extension, because there was no extension apart from the 6 weeks being 8 weeks. It was a case of if any late submissions came forward, they would not be ignored. That was what I said to the planning officers. So I think it just confused matters if I say to people it's open again for another 2 weeks. That I don't think that would achieve anything.
Thank you. So up next to speak, I've got Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It was really, I was quite concerned by Councillor Took's request to be able to challenge Cabinet. It appeared he was speaking on behalf of the Scrutiny Committee. The Scrutiny Committee is a democratic body that would need to take a vote on whether to challenge Cabinet. And that vote would determine whether any challenge could happen, not because one or two members of the committee would like to challenge Cabinet. I just wanted to make that point.
Okay, I think it was Councillor Took, I think, was referring to our terms of reference, in that our role is to challenge Cabinet and its decisions. And I think that was really only the point that was being made. Okay, so I think I'm going to move on from there. Mr. Jonathan Mayor, in terms of what you said from a legal perspective, can I take it then that we cannot vote on this item, and I can move on to the rest of the agenda?
Chairman, I think what I've taken from this is that the committee, certainly you from the chair, was supportive of the suggestion from John Selbrun that there is a general scrutiny review of how consultation is undertaken, but that you're accepting my advice that you simply cannot extend the consultation period on the local plan, as that has been decided upon by the Cabinet.
Okay, and we'll be in breach of our constitution if we did so.
Yes.
Thank you. So if I'll move on to agenda item 7, Cabinet Forward Plan, decisions of recent Cabinet meetings. So does any member have any comment to make on the Cabinet Forward Plan? Not. Okay, I'll move on to agenda item 8, which is the Climate and Ecological Emergency Strategy consultation results and recommended changes to the final draft. Members, the recommendation is to Place and Resources Scrutiny Committee consider the outcomes of the consultation and amendments to the Climate and Ecological Emergency Strategy and Action Plan and recommend its final approval to the Cabinet and full Council, in which we can make comment that we can then pass over to Cabinet. So I think it's Councillor Bryan, I think, is going to present.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm Councillor Ray Bryan. I hold the portfolio for Highways, Travel and the Environment. And good morning, everybody. In May 2019, this council declared a climate emergency, and later in 2019, we amended it to a climate and ecological emergency. Dorset Council was just 1 month old when this decision was made. Resource was increased and groups of members of staff were asked to form subgroups to discuss each part of the council which could influence the council's carbon footprint. As the report states, we formed a cross-party executive advisory panel to guide the council on the strategic path. After many hours, days and weeks, months, and now years of work, the council produced a draft climate and ecological emergency strategy and costed action plan, which was approved by the EAP and sent to Cabinet in October 2020 for the approval to go out to consultation. This can be seen in Appendix A. The consultation process started in October 2020, and due to us having to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic, the period of consultation was extended to the 20th of January 2021. As part of that consultation, we asked residents and interested groups to answer questions, but also to add comments. In addition to the responses to the questions, over 12,000 written comments were received. These were analysed, and at an EAP meeting on the 25th of February, we discussed amendments to the draft climate and ecological emergency strategy and action plan. Appendix B shows the analysis of those comments and the recommended changes. And if I can just highlight, 8.3 of the report outlines the form the consultation took. 8.4 of the report shows the comms plan. 8.5 shows the work we did with town and parish councils and other stakeholders, including meetings with young people. And I have to say that was the most eye-opening exercise that I think I've undertaken as a councillor. 8.6 explains the reasoning behind the short version of the survey. Point 9 shows the consultation results and implications. And 9.3 shows the overall high level of positive net agreement with most sections of our strategy. It was no surprise to me that our target dates received less enthusiasm, but I've always said that I could not support making promises either I or those following me could not keep. In January 2021, Dorset Council was awarded £19 million in grant funding. And in my discussions with people in central government, we were awarded this money based on the quality of our strategic and action plan, plus the quality and quantity and detail in our bid. It is no secret that due to the COVID pandemic, this council has financial challenges ahead. So this grant gives us just the kickstart we needed. But this is just the start. As you will read, there are many ways in which we can move towards becoming carbon neutral. In addition to the grant, we have plans to change our vehicles over a period of time to be either electric or hydrogen powered. Utilising technology, we have over the past few months reduced the amount of miles officers and members travel. Some of this may carry forward. We have already gone green on our electricity supply. We are installing EV charging points across the area, and we plan to increase these in number. All of this is in the action plan. It is not just about money, it's about changing the way we do things and getting the public to change their ways. In 2 years, we have come a long way, but there is still very much more to do. During the coming years, I believe technology will surface that may assist us in the changes we need. The officer team who are here in force will be pleased to answer questions, as will I. And I put the recommendation for you to look at and pass comment. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bryan. I've just been made aware, I think, that Councillor Toot wishes to make a declaration.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just very briefly, following your example earlier on, it's probably appropriate to say that I was on the Climate Change and Ecological Emergency EAP. I just want to make that clear to everybody.
Thank you, Councillor Took. Yeah, for the transparency. Thank you. So I've got a number of people that have requested to speak prior to the meeting. So if I can first go to Councillor Biggs. I don't have Councillor Biggs. Miss Watson, did we have the question from Councillor Biggs sent through?
Chairman, I think that was to do with the Dorchester office strategy.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
You're
quite right.
I think is that right, Councillor Biggs?
Yes.
It is, yeah. It's my mistake. I beg your
Okay,
pardon.
I think it's Councillor Ireland who asked to speak on this one.
It is, yes. Councillor Ireland.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So this has already been partially touched on by earlier questions, especially the public, and Councillor Bryan's touched on it. So it's the level of response to the consultation. So, personally, it seems to me that Dorset Council made actually a huge effort across all the platforms I'm on anyway, and outlets, radio interviews, that sort of thing. And I certainly pushed it on my own social media and with my parishes, and I'm sure my fellow councillors did as well. But reading the paper, one concern I have, I've got two, is that the short survey, we're told, doesn't actually inform or alter the climate action plan. So why not? What was the point? Why do we have this paper before us today when we haven't actually taken into account all means of survey responses? So, and how will we? But my main concern is the fact that in the consultation figures, 84% of the respondents were over 45, and I think it says 46% were over 65, and 0.6, so less than one were under 18. Just 8 people in total. That's 0.002% of our population. And I just had a look on GeoWessex, and the under 16 population of Dorset Council alone is 59,000 people, and we only got 8 people responding. So the oncoming tsunami of the climate change effects and impacts on how we live on this planet, and we are desperately trying to slow them. This council is taking its part in that, and we hope to reverse them. But in the end, the vast majority of people who responded won't actually be affected that much. It's the people who didn't respond that will. And I know their engagement by other means was actually conducted face-to-face, I guess, or over Zoom with COVID-19. And I'm not blaming Dorset Council for the fact that so few of those who will be impacted failed to take an interest. But, I ask that this should be acknowledged and a commitment made that we work much, much harder with all these people and this cohort, with our educational partners, with your support. And we need to change our communication strategy to ensure that these people are engaged and do have an impact on and an influence on what we do, because in the end, it's their lives, it's not ours.
Thank you, Councillor Ireland. I didn't see a question in that, but I'll go to.
Oh, it's a request.
Okay, I'll go back to Councillor Ray Bryant to make comment on it, and then to the lead officer and Anthony Litchfield if he's got anything you would like to say.
Yes, I share Nick's views. Sorry, Councillor Ireland's views on this, because we tried desperately to get everybody to look at this and take part. The EAP decided to produce the shortened version so that we could actually get at the younger people, and unfortunately this didn't really happen, and it's a big disappointment. I said in my preamble to this that I was actually quite taken aback when we met with the younger generation. To hear their views was quite distressing, and I'm sure those people that sit on the EAP with me felt exactly the same way. There are some lessons to be learned from this as to how we get at the younger generation, and I think it's something that I would support Cabinet actually having a look at this to see how we can best come up with something, and then bring some proposals back to you. Sorry about that. Sorry. It's not my end, by the way. But yeah, I think I'm actually going to talk to the leader and say, can we set something in motion that perhaps looks at the way we have generated enthusiasm from the younger generation. This is an absolute essential thing for my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren and generations to come. I am absolutely passionate about this, as you probably gathered by my tone. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Littlechild, is there anything you want to add to that?
Sorry, having a little bit of speaker trouble there. No, I don't think there's anything to add beyond what Councillor Bryan's already mentioned. There are some specific actions within the strategy to try and particularly target and engage with young people, and that will be something that we'll be developing into the communication strategy as we sort of go forward.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Is that okay, Councillor Ireland?
Yes, thank you. Cheers.
Thank you. So if there Any other non-committee members that wish to speak on this item? The next one I've got is Councillor Jones.
I'll try and get, yes, I just wondered, Dorset Youth Council have discussed climate change a lot. They've done a lot of research on it. They've written documents on it. Have we taken into account their documents? Have we looked at them? Because they are very significant, and these are the young people that will be affected in the future.
Thank you. Councillor Bryan.
I'm actually going to pass this over to either Anthony or Matt, because they have the details of who responded. I can say that I had meetings with Dorset Youth Parliament members, so we tried our best, but I'll pass over to Matt or Anthony to answer that question.
Okay, Mr. Littlechild, do you want to go first?
Sorry, my apologies. I will learn to drive. I think similar to the last question. So as Councillor Bryan said, we've sort of engaged them a little bit. They were present and participated in the call for ideas exercise that we did towards the end of year before, and we've had some sort of ongoing discussions. I'm not 100% sure whether they've actually commented on. I don't think they have actually commented on the strategy itself. So I don't think they were actual respondees, as far as I'm aware. But obviously, as we go forward and we start to develop our approach in terms of engaging young people, then there will be one of the groups that we'll be particularly trying to work with and pick up on, the work that they've already been doing. So we have been having some discussions, but that needs to develop further.
Thank you. Mr. Reeks, is there anything you wish to add?
No, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman, could I just add, it's Councillor Ray Bryan. Can I just add that obviously if Councillor Jones has some specifics that she wants to discuss with me, I'd be only too pleased to take this outside the meeting and see how we can work closer with that particular group. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Before I move to the committee members debate, I've got no other members from across the chamber that wish to speak. Just before I do that, is there anything at this point that Mr. John Selgin would like to add?
Chairman, I've nothing to add at this stage. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So my next speaker is Councillor Heatley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm horribly conscious after the last set of contributions that I'm over 65. So I'm part of that group that's perhaps having far too much influence on this particular debate. I want to recommend 2 additions to the committee today on the recommendation. I am concerned that the consultation has been presented very much in terms of the numerical results, and that there's a certain feeling that the better the numerical result, the more you might have to change something or not change something, and that the actual reasons that may underlie things tend to get a bit disregarded. One thing which I think is important, this is a point that Joe Parish made and which was behind Sandra Reeves' question, it does matter who comments. So if the Dorset Wildlife Trust say it's weak on ecology, I think that's rather important. It's much more important than me saying it. So I would like a slightly more nuanced approach to some of the responses here. Now, the biggest single disagreement over this plan has been over the target dates, the degree of urgency. That has been, it is where the lowest amount of agreement there is with the plan, and it is a subject that Cabinet and the full Council are going to come to terms with, not least because there are 2 motions on more advanced dates that were proposed the summer before last and sent to the EAP, and sooner or later they've got to get back to Council. So sooner or later we've got to have this debate. I'm a bit concerned about the quality of that debate. It seems to me that on the side of those who want targets that are faster than the plan, there's a lot of saying it's an emergency, we must do it quicker, but perhaps not a lot of reasoning on the consequences of why it should be done quicker. Equally, on the side of Councillor Bryan, we hear continually he will only agree with what's feasible, what's practical, and so on. I think that we should recommend that when this goes to Cabinet and Council, it is accompanied by a paper which is no more than 1 page of A4. I'm incidentally very keen on getting the Council's papers a bit shorter, which contains the 2 cases for reducing the target times and for going with what's in the thing. Councillor Bryan can explain in a bit more detail why it isn't feasible and where it isn't, and I think he will probably relish that opportunity. I'd be willing to produce the alternative case, but I do think we need to have a real argument about it rather than just relying on how many people said this and how many people said that. I want the quality of that debate to be improved. My second point is slightly different. What has been produced is a carbon dioxide reduction plan, a carbon dioxide reduction plan from fossil fuels in particular. And it's an extremely good plan. Apart possibly from the date, I've no particular quarrels with it, but it is not a response to what we were supposed to be doing, which was a response to the climate and ecological emergency. It's not a response seriously in 3 areas. First of all, on mitigation of climate change, there's very little mention of greenhouse gases other than carbon dioxide, principally methane and nitrous oxide in Dorset, which amount to about 10% of the total. Now, it was absolutely right to concentrate on the immediate problem, which was carbon dioxide, here and now, and it should still be absolutely the core of the plan. But I think there is quite a lot missing on those 2 gases, and that there ought to be a bit more concentration on them. Secondly, curiously, I think the plan is rather weak on adaptation to climate change. It doesn't actually contain an explicit account of how much climate change we expect to hit Dorset, which is important. We need to understand that what we do to mitigate climate change in Dorset itself has a minute effect on Dorset. It's we are 1/20,000th of the world population, so that our mitigation efforts, while we must do them, morally we must do them, it is adaptation which immediately affects our residents. And for example, on adaptation, there are things in the climate change, in the action plan, but they are mainly plans to have plans. They are saying we must consider resilience of food supply, resilience of our businesses, resilience of our transport system, and so on and so forth. We have much more work to do on adaptation. Finally, on ecology, once again, there are lots of things missing. There's a lot on flooding, which is fair enough, but the word soil, as far as I can see, doesn't appear anywhere in there, which is massively important for our agriculture. We have nothing on sea and fishing, which are very important for some of our industries. There's very little on biodiversity loss, and there's rather little on fertilizer pollution and that kind of thing. What I would like to do, all 3 of those things in the end come down to changes in land use. So there is a unifying theme for those things. I would like us to recommend to Cabinet and Council that they address those missing issues over the next 2 years in a conscious addition to the plan. Councillor Bryan's always said this is a developing document. I think there is a document, a direction for it to develop from the immediate things that it has tackled well. I've got a text I'd like to add. Shall I put it in the what's it bar, if I can make this work? There it is. I'd like to add one page giving the reasons for and against a target of zero emissions by an earlier date as compared to the dates in the plan, and recognition that the plan is incomplete on adaptation, other greenhouse gases and ecology, and the council should resolve to complete these areas by mid-2023. We need time to do this, and we don't want to be diverted from the crucial carbon dioxide reduction. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'm going to go to. Sorry, was that a proposal, Councillor Heatley?
That's a proposal. I don't know when anyone's going to second it. We'll see.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Parks, are you looking to second the proposal? Sorry, I've moved into committee debate. Sorry, you missed your opportunity. Councillor Rowe, do you wish to second the proposal?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. I'm just going to go to Mr. John Selgren to make any comment on that, please.
Sorry, Chair, it's gone off mute quickly. I haven't actually anything to add at this stage, Chairman.
Okay. So is there any member that wishes to speak to the proposal that's on the table? I've got Councillor Took.
Thank you, Chair. I think the proposal is excellent. I'm happy to, Councillor Rowe beat me to it by half a second, but I'd also be happy to second it. I think Councillor Heatley is quite right. We need a proper discussion that is a qualitative discussion, not simply a quantitative discussion. And I think a paper such as he suggests, and a brief paper, I'm also with him. I've read far too many 600-page reports for my liking, frankly. Thank you very much. But a short paper that puts both sides of the argument, I think would be an excellent debating point for Cabinet to pick up on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Took. Councillor Parks.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'd actually like to speak against this. I think what's been prepared is an excellent report, and I think what Councillor Heatley has picked up is some very good points. However, it does concern me that in the current climate, and I use climate in the terms of the economic climate, moving out of the crisis that the pandemic has put us in the past year, I don't feel that the council should be putting undue pressure on itself with relation to the timeframes. I'm not discounting that these discussions shouldn't take place, because I believe they should take place. However, I don't think we should put unrealistic timeframes of 2023 on the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parks. Councillor Canning.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a question for Councillor Bryan, actually. I've noted both today and previously you said about this being a living document and being evolving over time. Do you have in mind how that would actually work in practice? Would there be a group that regularly looks at this again in the future? Do you open it to future submissions? I'll just have his opinion really on what thoughts he has on that.
Councillor Bryan.
Yes, happy to respond. I've made it very clear that the work of the AP is now coming to an end, and the work will then be passed over to the Policy and Overview Committee, which is chaired by Darryl Turner. As we know, we started the document. This document is still going to evolve over the years to come. I've picked up on a number of things that Councillor Heatley has said, and many of them I agree with. We went out to consultation. The majority of people supported the dates that we'd proposed. I've always said that if we can do it earlier, we will do. The bulk of the work will be done earlier, and of course a lot of that has the benefit of 19 million just being thrown at it. When we looked at the target date, we tried to take into effect the fact that if we got no help from central government, then we would this would be a taxpayer's bill. The bill we estimate to be something in the region of about 130 million pounds for getting to a carbon neutral state. That's just for the council's bill, and I think we've got to be very careful that we don't introduce an earlier date. And obviously I can defend this at cabinet if this gets if this proposal goes through, but I think we've got to be very careful that we don't bring a date forward that we know in our hearts is going to be difficult to achieve purely from a financial point of view. We need to build up money, and I've had discussions with both Aidan and Councillor Suttle as to how we do this in years to come. But it's very important that we don't that I don't make the mistake of trying to do things that I really don't feel confident of in my own mind. I won't be a councillor when this comes. So it's not going to affect me, but I think I've got to be careful what legacy I leave to the council in the future. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bryan. Councillor Roberts to speak next.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Bryan has covered quite a lot of the ground. My point really was that I cannot support this amendment because I believe that we should be giving approval to the proposal in the acknowledgement that there are the 20% hard to do and hard to reach is not going to be possible to shorten that time frame without an enormous amount of expenditure, which, as Councillor Parks mentioned, we do not have in this pandemic. I think we have to be very realistic. We're achieving, it's still a very ambitious goal, and I think we would do well to support the original recommendation rather than try to push it even into much greater expenditure on this amendment. So I regret I will not be able to support it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Okay, I got Councillor Took to speak.
Thanks, Chair. We are discussing an amendment that is asking for information and arguments to be put on a paper to Cabinet. We are not here to discuss the pros and cons of the timescales concerned, whether 2040, 2050, whatever is the right or the wrong date. What we're asking for, or what is being asked for in this amendment, is very simply that a report be presented to Cabinet, and Cabinet can then discuss the pros and cons. That's not really what we're here to do at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Took. Councillor Heatley, in terms of the amendment you've made, would you be prepared to take the last sentence out? It gives that time frame.
Do you mean about mid-2023?
Yeah.
I'm not. I mean,
or change it to an aspiration.
I'd change it to in due course. Look, these things are difficult and hideously complicated, and I understand the points about pressure on people's time, but I do think there should be a recognition that we have not completed the job, and I think we should resolve to complete it, say, in due course.
Okay, so we take the date out and put in due course. Could I just ask some?
And could I endorse what Councillor Took just said? I mean, I deliberately not said anything on the merits of the case one way or the other. This is a scrutiny discussion on making good decisions, not on the arguments one way or another.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I fully understand. Could I just go to Mr. Mayor? Sorry, I've got Ms. Watson, point of order.
Just clarification in terms of where we are with what we're discussing. So the proposal from Councillor Heatley that was seconded by Councillor Rowe. First of all, can I just confirm that those were additional wording to be added to the wording set out in the recommendation in terms of supporting forwarding the strategy to Cabinet and full Council? So that's just the first thing I need clarification on. And then
Yes.
second, just to say that Councillor Heatley, in changing the words in that last sentence from mid-2023 to in due course, can I just check that the seconder, Councillor Rowe, is also supportive of that, please?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Watson. I was coming to that. It was my understanding that it was to be added on to the end of the recommendation that's already on the paper. Councillor Rowe, are you happy to?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could just go to Jonathan Mayer, if he's happy with that as wording, and I'll go to Councillor Bryan.
Chairman, thank you. The good news is I've managed to sort out the problem with my camera eventually. Chairman, the wording that Councillor Heatley has put forward is wording that members can properly vote upon and come to a view on. I would question whether the second part actually adds a great deal, especially wording like in due course is rather, from a lawyer's point of view, feels a bit imprecise. So I wonder if the whole of that sentence does particularly add anything. But from my point of view, as someone who would always encourage councillors to work within the principles for good decision making and have reasons in front of you to support your decision making, I certainly would encourage you to go with the first part of that recommendation.
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Heatley, as I suggested previously, would you be prepared to take out the last sentence so we can move this on?
You mean the beginning the council should resolve?
Yeah.
Oh, go on then. Let's have a chance of getting it through.
Thank you. Councillor Rowe, are you happy with that?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Councillor Bryan.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I thought it was important that I just point out that if we go back to question 6 that we had this morning, when Matt Reeks was giving the response, he actually pointed out very clearly that overall a wide number of actions within the strategy will not only reduce emissions but will also have ecological benefits and contribute towards ecological net gain, as noted by the co-benefit symbols within the action plan. He also pointed out that at the current time there isn't a standard mechanism for measuring or monitoring progress in tackling the ecological emergency. And I just wanted to raise that because we had it earlier on in one of the questions, and I think it's actually relevant to the conversation you're having at the moment. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. So I've got a request from one of the councillors to say the exact wording. I don't know if you can put the wording up, Ms. Watson, or if members go to the start of the chat column. Mr. Heatley, Councillor Heatley did put it in at the start of the chat column. The wording is there. Okay.
Chairman, I've just added the wording to the chat bar. I don't know if you want it read for the purpose of the public.
If you could, please, yes.
Okay, so my understanding of the recommendation that's been proposed and seconded is Place and Resources Scrutiny Committee have considered the outcomes of the consultation and amendments to the Climate and Ecological Emergency Strategy and Action Plan and recommend its final approval to Cabinet and full Council. And then the additional recommendations are that a one-page document giving the reasons for and against a target of 0 emissions by earlier dates as compared to the dates in the plan. And the second part, recognition that the plan is incomplete on adaptation, other greenhouse gases and ecology.
Thank you. So if I've got no other members wishing to speak, on the committee?
Sorry, Chairman, just on that wording, my understanding is that both Councillor Heatley and Councillor Rowe as seconder took out the second part of that, the bit beginning recognition that the plan is incomplete.
No, they took out the last sentence, which
was 2023. Sorry.
Yeah. The council should resolve to complete these areas by mid-2023.
Yeah, fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Apologies.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go to the vote on the amendment, please. Just the amendment only, not the full recommendation yet. So.
Sorry, Chairman, can I just clarify, just again on a point of order? Obviously, the recommendation in your report is there as an officer recommendation. So my understanding of what you are doing at the moment is that you have now got a proposal which has been seconded, and so it's not an amendment. You are voting on what has been proposed and seconded. And Jonathan, I'm sure, will correct me if I'm wrong.
I thought it was an amendment to the recommendation, but
you haven't. When you came to the discussion, there was no motion on the table. In proposing that motion, Councillor Heatley and Councillor Rowe have put that motion on the table for discussion, and it's been proposed and seconded.
Yeah, you are correct. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move to the proposal then, please, members. If there's no dissent, can I take that as accepted, or do we need to go to a roll call and a vote?
I'm sorry, are we accepting the recommendation with the addition or original recommendation? I'm unclear how we can choose, Chairman.
Yeah.
Chairman, do you wish that I can offer some clarification?
My understanding is the recommendation with the addition, but
yeah, what has been proposed by Councillor Heatley and seconded by Councillor Rowe is the recommendation that is included in your agenda paper that is on your screen now, with the addition of the 2 extra points, which is in your chat bar and is what I read out a few moments ago. That is what you're voting on. You either vote for it or against it.
Okay, so I think we'll do it with a roll call. Ms. Watson, please, if you could do a roll call.
Sorry, bear with me.
Okay.
Okay. So the recommendation as proposed and seconded, if you could please either say for or against. Councillor Bartlett.
For.
Councillor Canning.
For.
Councillor Parks.
Against.
Councillor Adkins.
Against.
Councillor Trite.
Against.
Councillor Shortell.
For.
Councillor Roberts.
Against.
Councillor Rowe.
For.
Councillor Took.
For.
Councillor Heatley.
For.
Okay, just bear with me.
I made that 6.
Yes, so that's it received 6 fours and 4 against, so that is carried.
Yeah, that's as I make it as well. Ms. Watson, thank you. So as Ms. Watson says, that is carried. So thank you, members, for that. I'll move on to agenda item 9, the Dorchester office strategy. And I believe I have Councillor Ferrari in the meeting to present.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure I need to spend long on the paper. The underpinning requirement is that the nature of Dorset's staffing structure is changing. It's changing because of working practice, it's changing because of technology. This cabinet paper is the flow through of that in terms of Dorset's asset strategy within Dorchester itself. We have too much office space. We need to work out what's the best thing to do with the office space that we have available to us. This paper looks at what we believe is the best option, which is the repurposing of Southport's house into an alternative use and the moving of the bulk of our staff into County Hall. Would welcome conversation and discussion about that. Thank you.
Thank you. So,
Chair, Councillor Rowe has indicated she had a question on the previous item before we moved off.
we've moved on. I did ask if any other members wanted to speak on that, and I had nothing. So if I can move to, is there any comment from the lead officer, Dave Thompson?
Chairman, just before, it's John Selgren, Executive Director Place. Just before you do that, just a reminder, and you might want to ask Mr. Mayor or Ms. Watson to comment on this, but just a reminder that we've got a paper in the public domain and some supporting commercially confidential documents. So I think, Chairman, you may want to just say a few words about that matter before we get into debate.
Can I? The members were brief before we started the meeting, but Mr. Mayor, would you like to make any comment on that before we go any further?
Chairman, I think members are aware of the need that if they do wish to discuss certain areas around finances and costings, that they will need to go into confidential session. And perhaps if there is a desire to do that, we could wrap up all of those questions and deal with them at the very end to avoid you practically having to leave the meeting and rejoin again. There are also several what I would refer to as sensitive facilities that I would prefer if you were not to discuss them in public. Emergency planning centre and data centre location, please.
Thank you. Yes, so members, if any exempt business is mentioned, or if you think you're going to move into that within the debate, if we could just hold that, and actually, if we can, just go into the exempt meeting on the one occasion, if possible. Thank you. Mr. Thompson, would you like to say anything at this time?
No, I think that's been adequately summarised by Councillor Ferrari in terms of the main recommendations of the paper and the rationale for those recommendations.
Okay, thank you. I've got several members that have requested to speak, so if I could take them in the order that I received them outside of this meeting. Councillor Biggs.
Thank you, Chairman. My question is as follows. The report rightly notes that Southwark's House is a modern building less than 10 years old and costing nearly £10 million. Tables on page 216 and 218 in the report show the overall CO2 levels of each building. I have checked the calculations dividing the total CO2 with the total floor area and concur with the values stated. However, they seem to make little sense and appear to show that Southwark's House is poorly performing. How can Southwark's House, 36 kilograms of CO2 per year per metre squared, be some 22% less efficient than County Hall, 28 kilograms of CO2 per year per metre squared? Southwark's House is a modern building built to a very high BREEAM standard, with solar panels offsetting significant amounts of CO2, whereas County Hall is a building started after the war with various 1960s additions and 1980s. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson, are you prepared to answer that?
I'll try and answer that, Councillor, as best I can. The difference in energy performance of the two buildings is in part due to the highly efficient operation of County Hall, which is performing significantly better than may be expected for a building of its type and age, but also on account of the differences in the way in which the two buildings have been designed and serviced. Whilst County Hall is an older building, it has benefited from a number of relevant energy performance upgrades in recent years, including retrofitting of cavity wall insulation, installation of a significant array of solar PV panels, widespread lighting and associated control upgrades to LEDs, installation of a voltage optimizer, bringing savings in electrical consumption, and replacement of aging boilers with modern efficiency equivalents. Further to this, and perhaps most significantly, County Hall has benefited from a very well-established building energy management system, BEMS, used to control and optimise the heating system. This was originally installed over 30 years ago, but upgraded and fine-tuned substantially in the intervening years, and which has played a major role in improving the energy performance for heating of County Hall. Indeed, as you've heard earlier, a further upgrade is planned, funded from the Salix grant. All of this means that despite its age, County Hall performs very well in terms of energy for heating compared to the typical UK office building. Southwark's house differs from County Hall, being a modern and highly serviced building, as you rightly pointed out. It has a mixed mode ventilation system, mechanical ventilation and air conditioning in some areas, advanced lighting controls, automated windows, etc. Whilst this has been designed in line with BREEAM standards, including an emphasis on air quality and comfort levels for occupants, some of these services will inevitably incur higher electrical consumption than a simple building like County Hall. Indeed, it's probably a common observation in the energy management industry that the real life difference between new modern buildings and their older counterparts is often very different from the theoretical prediction derived from design stage modelling.
Thank you. Do you wish to come back, Councillor Biggs?
Well, that's all very interesting. I know they've done excellent work on building management systems in County Hall. I suppose a supplementary question would be around if you're intending to use some of this 19 million, which was alluded to earlier, for replacing the gas boilers with an electrical air source heating system. Electricity has a higher CO2 value, surprisingly, than gas. So not only will it be costing more money, but it could be actually increasing your CO2, which I can't see how you can offset. It's just a comment really of what your views are on that, please.
I think we've outlined in the paper actually that some of the investment of the Salix funding, approximately 2.1 million into County Hall, will probably reduce the carbon consumption by about 100 tonnes. I think that's in the paper. And clearly there's been a lot of work, as Councillor Ray Bryan has mentioned, by an array of team members looking at how we can improve the sustainability and environmental performance of County Hall with further investment.
Thank you. Yes, it is on page 210. I just wondered whether or not do you expect that 2.1 million, that cost to escalate, or is that an impossible question to answer at this time?
That's the money that we've actually identified at this moment in time. Obviously, that you know, as we go forward, there might be further improvements that we might identify, and that's subject to whether additional funding could be made available or grant funding made available to us. Okay, thank you. Councillor Biggs, are you satisfied with that?
Thank you. Yes, very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Now, next to speak is Councillor Ireland.
Okay, there you go. Thank you. So my concern is totally different, actually. So I'm concerned that this report is totally Dorchester centric. When it's clear to all of us, I hope, that any strategy for the office use of Dorset Council needs to take a holistic approach to the whole of Dorset Council area. So deciding on a solution for Dorchester when the wider picture is either not known or is not accounted for just seems to me a completely wrong way to go about it. And in particular, the executive summary in the public paper regarding the estate states, and I'm quoting, one aim is to reduce its environmental impact, and another is that it's to meet the needs of future agile working. And my contention is this report does neither of these. The entire report is driven with one aim only, maximising savings and generating income by converting Southwark's House and the South Annex into residential accommodation, and that is the recommendation in front of us, without wider discourse on what it means for Dorchester's residents or its economy, let alone anything else. And deciding what to do with Dorchester does have an impact on our other towns, yet this isn't mentioned at all. Items such as the option of using Southwark's House as a hotel, for example, which has been publicised for several years now, they're dismissed purely on a lower financial gain to the council, rather than a wider view as to what is best for both our residents, our businesses and our towns. And if you go back to the two aims I've highlighted, the climate implications section of this paper makes absolutely no mention of the climate impact of centralising 2,000 plus staff in Dorchester. Zero, zip, zilch, nada, nothing. One would have expected that an organisation this size would have conducted a detailed study of where its staff live, where they work, and how they commute between the two before they decide to basically stick with the status quo and have the majority based in Dorchester. So how does that dovetail into reducing the carbon footprint of Dorset Council? Because I can't see that it does. And the only stop I can see to agile working is reducing the hot desk ratio. You know, agile working is not the same as flexible working. It's about where or even when employees can work, how they perform and what they achieve. It is not that Arthur Dent can sit on a desk in Central Hall, in County Hall on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays, for example. So my questions, and I do have two questions, where are the reports which detail where our staff live and work? And why do so many have to commute to Dorchester where more local options either exist or could be created? Thank you.
Thank you. Is that for you to answer, Mr. Thompson?
I'm not sure whether Councillor Ferrari wants to pick that up in the first instance.
Okay, Councillor Ferrari.
Thank you. Nick's right. Lots of those issues aren't covered in this paper, but that's because that's not what this paper's about. This paper is about the world that we find ourselves in. We find ourselves in a world where we have more office space than we need. There's a completely separate strand of work, which is about designing the work environment and the work practices of the future. That will change from the pre-COVID world, and it will continue to evolve in perpetuity as the technology tools that we deliver to our workforce to allow them to work closer to residents will all keep evolving. What we'll need in terms of a workforce location will keep evolving. But that's not this piece of work. This piece of work is about the fact that we've got an empty building sitting in Dorchester that isn't contributing to Dorset's economy, isn't contributing to Dorchester's economy, and something needs to be done with it. And you can put lots of other considerations on into this process, but they're not free. The full year cost of leaving Southwark's house is about 600k per annum, 50k a month, £1,500 per day. So every day we don't do something, we spend £1,500 of council taxpayers' money to wait our decision. We will reach a decision at the end of this, but Southwark's house will stay empty all the way to the point where we make that decision. And so all of these issues that Nick perfectly appropriately raise are issues that we should be thinking about, but they're not on the critical path to doing the right thing for Dorchester, Dorset, by doing something with Southwark's house. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferrari. Do I have any officer who needs to add anything?
Just picking up on Councillor Ferrari's points, there is a separate work stream, as everyone's aware, about the Dorset workplace and about how we are working more agilely and flexibly. And clearly that has an impact in terms of our office strategy, and that has been a fundamental impact in terms of how we're actually looking at the Dorchester office estate. And this was actually something that was actually brought forward as a result of the property strategy, where we were actually asked to focus on in the initial stages at Dorchester, and particularly because that's where we had the majority of our office-based staff.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thompson. Councillor Allen, did you need to come back on anything? Can I move on?
No, I won't. I'll leave it to others. Thank you.
Thank you. So next to speak is Councillor Rennie.
Councillor Taylor has just said, could I come in, as her question is on the same lines as Councillor Ireland. I'm happy if Councillor Taylor is taken next.
Okay, Councillor Rennie. I was coming to Councillor Taylor next anyway. Councillor Taylor.
Right.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Rennie, and also thank you very much, Councillor Bartlett. I'd just like to pick up on what Councillor Ireland has just said, and very much along the same sort of lines, because I personally think that you cannot put in a paper like this unless you have a long-term plan for where our staff are going to be based. And I do hear what was said about the cost of Southwark's house, but we've been in LGR now for the best part of 2 years, and to have taken 2 years to get to this point, I think is quite disappointing. I am going to talk about why staff should be relocated, and I am going to be quite parochial and talk about Weymouth. but I could quite happily talk about any of the other major towns across Dorset. But I would expect councillors from their areas to make the argument for staff to be employed in their areas. Many of our staff travel from Weymouth to Dorchester every day. That adds around about an hour onto their work time. And I know things have changed since COVID, but what we're not doing with this is taking the opportunities that COVID has provided. Why are we still having people travelling all day? This sort of feels like when we started flexi-time, and we started that off really rigidly because we didn't recognise the advantages that flexi-time could bring. The advantages of having staff working as close to their homes as possible is huge. I think going back, when you look at the road up to Dorchester on the Ridgeway that crosses over the Ridgeway, you've only got to look at that to see how many people travel from Weymouth to Dorchester to go to work and going back later on in the day. We've just discussed the climate and ecology plan, and we really do need to take that into consideration. And my last point about this is that we have a member whose portfolio specifically includes Weymouth regeneration, and I know that your portfolio is largely restricted to assets, but assets are so closely linked to employment. So what we're actually saying with this paper, as far as I'm concerned, is that we want people to come and work in Weymouth. Weymouth is a lovely place to come and work, but Dorset Council isn't going to. We are going to just abandon them. From where I'm sitting, I would like to see this paper withdrawn and start again from the premise that are our staff in the right place, because this paper starts from the premise that we're not going to move anybody, and that is the wrong premise. And I think even if Southwark's House does cost us £1,500 a week, a day, sorry, we should have looked at this a long time ago, and it's just not the right way to go forward. We need to look at putting our staff out there. And if I can just finish, so that is my question. Could you please consider withdrawing this paper? And just as a last statement, I'd like to say that 20% of the population of rural Dorset lives south of the Ridgeway. Therefore, I think it's reasonable to have 20% of Dorset Council's jobs south of the Ridgeway, not expect them all to go to Dorchester. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Ferrari.
It may be more appropriate for me to concede to Councillor Wharf here at this point, because our assets strategy is that the assets function delivers the assets that the services departments have requested to deliver their service facilities, and so this is rolling out at the back end of the process. We don't drive where people work. We deliver the assets that the services need to deliver their functions. And Councillor Wharf is working on that workforce modelling, so it might be useful if he contributed at this point.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ferrari. Councillor Wharf, you wanted to make comment?
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Can hear you, yes.
Yeah, Councillor Wharf, my portfolio includes the workforce. We have, and I didn't produce a paper for this meeting, so this is from memory, and this gives you an idea of where we're going moving forward. We have done surveys of all the staff, and as you will be aware, the vast majority are working from home, and those who want to work from home by and large can, and those who want to work in an office, and there are occasions where they do, by and large they can, and a number are working in offices very part-time. I pop into the offices every now and again just to see for myself, and I was in at County Hall 2 days ago, and it was virtually empty. I literally mean 5 or 6 people in there. I will be running a members seminar in April, as in a few weeks' time, when we will talk about the results of the Dorset Workplace Survey and our understanding of where we're directing our efforts over the next few months. You all are aware that the pandemic has meant that things have changed dramatically, and we were very careful not to introduce final rules on anything until we saw some way out of the pandemic. So I can't tell you where we're going until we are much more clearly out of the pandemic. But I can tell you that we have conducted detailed surveys with all of the employees. We've given just about all employees the opportunity to work at home, full or part-time where they want to. And we've also talked about where they want to work when we start returning to whatever might be called normal. But because we're not there yet, we're not there yet. But I will be presenting to members some initial findings from the results of our surveys with workforce, and I'm happy to come to scrutiny when I've got some more detail on it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Wolf. That's good to hear. So I've got
Chair, could I make one more point to follow Councillor Wolf's? It says Weymouth in my job title, but that doesn't mean that I am there is any prejudice in favour of Weymouth in what I do. Weymouth's one of the centres that we need to support, but so is Dorchester and the list of other locations. The logical conclusion, though, of Councillor Taylor's suggestion that we should be moving workforce out from Dorchester to Weymouth and perhaps to other locations is that we have even less staff in Dorchester than we do now. So it strikes me that that line of argument underpins even more strongly the reason that we shouldn't pull this paper, that we should go forward with this paper. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Farry. I've got Mr. Selgren who wishes to make comment.
Thank you, Chairman. If I might, just perhaps a bit of commentary in response to points made by Councillor Fry and Councillor Wharf, and I hope in part also responds to the question that Councillor Taylor's raised, which is an important one. And what I observe is, and we've made reference to the Dorset workplace piece of work my colleague David McIntosh is leading on, is that the nature of work is changing, and that's not just because of COVID. It was actually changing a long while before that. So in reality, and I'm just reflecting, this will be the third council with which I've worked has been through a similar process, so that's at least 10 years that this issue has been around for local government and many other businesses. The reality is work is not quite in the nature that it was previously. So, you know, a lot of people don't work 9 to 5 in an office, and certainly in a council, the first thing I'd observe is that this is about the office strategy. It's only a proportion of the council staff who work in an office. Many of my own staff in place are permanently based out in the community as part of refuse collection teams, or as part of people working on the highway, or people working in our open spaces. So again, we just need to kind of put this into a context that the office-based employees are only a proportion of our workforce. And indeed, the point I made a moment ago, within that, there are probably, in simple terms, 3 types of worker. Those who are always in the office, which increasingly is a relatively rare number. Those that are what we call in and out, so they'll spend part of their working day or part of their working week in the office, but will then be out in the field. So, for example, some of my planning officers would be a very good example of that. And then we have those workers who effectively never are in an office environment, either because they're the type I spoke a moment ago, the nature of their work is such they don't use an office, but also we have a lot of workers who do work from home, sort of visiting officers who will spend the vast majority of their time working out in the community, will not require, not ask for a desk. And again, that's what the piece of work on the Dorset workplace is seeking to bottom. So the observation I'd make, and kind of what lies at the crux of this report, is to recognise that at the current moment in time, Dorset Council has a greater amount of office accommodation than it needs for its immediate operation. That's why, as Councillor Farry said, the focus is on making sure that we right-size the office requirement. The broader piece of work that's been alluded to has begun, that's going on. Councillor Taylor makes the point quite rightly about trying to reduce travel, but her reference was, I think, if I've understood her point correctly, largely focused on home to work travel. And for reasons I hope that I've explained a moment ago, that is a pertinent consideration, but so equally is to minimise the amount of travel on business mileage, so actually people travelling out into the community. And our colleagues in children's services through the Blueprint for Change in particular, but it's not unique to children's, but they've done a very, very extensive piece of work on this very recently. In looking at that Blueprint for Change, the focus has been to make sure that we enable our social workers in particular to be in easy access to their clients, i.e. out working from bases in the community that make it easy for them to access their clients, and similarly reduce the need for them to make extensive travel, particularly by car. I hope, Chairman, that's provided some context and perhaps in part a response to Councillor Taylor's question.
Thank you, Mr. Selgren. Councillor Taylor, you wish to come back?
Yes, if I could just comment, what I still don't understand is if we don't know how many staff are going to be working in Dorchester, how can we plan for the office space in Dorchester? And that is my fundamental question on this, because everybody has been talking about putting staff out into the community. And as you just alluded to on the blueprint for change, children's services are all working out in the community. But until we know how many staff we will be using in Dorchester, how can we have a paper that says that we need this office or we need that office? Because I can see a time that actually Southwark's House might be the better place than Collerton Park, because it's smaller. But by that time we'll have sold it off for housing. That's just where I'm coming from on this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any officer who would want to make comment on that, or try and move on?
Chairman, if I just John Selgren, Executive Director of Place, just very briefly, the work that's been done on the Dorset workplace has drawn extensive. I talked about having been involved in this type of work over probably a decade, so it's well trailed and well developed. So it's well known the patterns of how modern work is changing, impacting demand for office space. So this paper is concerned with taking that first step. But I think what we know from others that have trodden this path before us, that what normally happens is when the office space and the desks have been rationalised, there will be a further degree of rationalisation, but that tends to be the smaller part. So I think my response to Councillor Taylor's question about whether we might reach a point where we were down to a significantly smaller footprint, I think based on what we have seen others who do this and based on best practice, that's unlikely. So at this stage, it's based on a realistic assessment of what we know about our current workforce and where, with the benefit of, say, others who've done this work before us, the reduction in office requirement they've seen as a result of those rationalisation processes.
Thank you, Mr. Selgren. And I think it's alluded into the report, isn't it? There's been the start of the work on that in terms of the amount of officers and the desk reduction there would be. Okay.
Chairman, may I also comment as well? And I'm sure if David McIntosh wants to comment if he's here. Obviously, that in order to get to this report and talk about the desk ratios and things of that nature, there was extensive consultation with all the services and the directors and the heads of services in terms of their requirements. So in order to get to the numbers and to understand what's the requirement is, we actually did do some significant internal consultation with our services.
Okay, thank you. Does Mr. McIntosh want to make any comment at this point in the debate?
Not particularly, Chair, no.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McIntosh.
Not particularly, Chairman, at this point, no.
Thank you. So if I can move now to the next speaker is Councillor Rennie.
Thank you very much. It's really interesting that I want to talk about scrutiny as a generalisation, really, and the previous speakers have sort of shown to me the importance of scrutiny, and the importance of scrutiny is to be sure you're making the right recommendations to Cabinet. That's one of the reasons for scrutiny. And without all of this evidence that you're now talking about, has the work's been done to gather the evidence, but the Scrutiny Committee, even in the exempt papers, have not got all of this evidence to be able to make a recommendation today. My feeling is. Councillor Ferrari talks about speed, but, and that's probably why all this work has been done before, but surely it would have been easier to share that knowledge before today. in the previous debate about climate change, Councillors Tuck and Heatley talked about good scrutiny as well, and John Selgren's talking about scrutinising consultations. So there's been a lot of discussion around this. So I'm just hoping today that the Scrutiny Committee would accept that there is a need for more scrutiny work to be done on this aspect of the asset transfer before it can go forward. We've now thankfully got scrutiny officers, and we've got support and capacity to do scrutiny in more depth than we had before. There's plenty of report in the exempt papers about what we could do with the building and the cost, but I've learnt more about what's happening by the speakers earlier on than what I read in the papers. I'm not going into the exempt papers, so we don't need to worry about that. I just question the need for more information to make final decisions on the use of the redundant buildings here in Dorchester. And I'm uncertain that the recommendations as they stand at the moment don't allow for this at all. I'm not allowed, I'm not here to tell anybody how to do scrutiny or anything. You'll be doing scoping and you'll know who you might want to talk to. But please consider further information that you might have at your fingertips, really. Dorchester Town Council has done some work around heritage tourism strategy. They in that talk about the need for a hotel, but there's not much talked about this at the moment. I think a master plan maybe for our market towns is important. I think also a master plan is really important and a way forward for the town itself here in Dorchester. This is where we are talking about putting our HQ. We don't want to leave a less lasting legacy that's just, as Councillor Taylor's just said, we might leave a lasting legacy that is the wrong building that's being decided upon in the end. So I think my real question is about the need for further scrutiny before this goes forward. I know Councillor Ferrari is talking about the need for speed, but what do we say about repentant leisure if you go too fast? Measure twice, cut once, all of these sort of analogies. So my question is, could we not have further scrutiny through task and finish groups or a working party?
Thank you, Councillor.
That's my question.
Okay, thank you. I think this is the first step on a long road of actually reforming and reshaping the authority. Councillor Ferrari.
Thank you. And can I defend the officers for a second here? On the previous item, they were criticised for too much paper, and on this item, they're criticised for not enough. I think it's a difficult line to walk. It would have been quite easy to put another 100 or 2 pages on the back of this thing, and I'm not sure it would have enhanced the debate very significantly. A lot of the issues that Councillor Rennie talks about are absolutely appropriate. We need to decide a lot of things about the future of our estate all across Dorset, not just Dorchester. But some of the pieces of the jigsaw are relatively plain, and what is relatively plain in Dorchester is we have much more office space than we need. Now we can nuance where it should be and increase it a bit or reduce it a bit, but we've got tons more than we need. And I think we're being we're not taking our responsibilities for the budget seriously if we don't deal with an issue that's staring us in the face and saying you should do something with this building. And all the HR strategies issues are real. I'm very happy that they get worked through, but it doesn't change the fundamental issue that we've got more office space than we need, and we're never going to need to go back to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferrari. Mr. Thompson, do you have anything to add?
Yes, can I just pick up the Councillor Rennie's point about hotels? So obviously that as part of this paper, we have actually considered various options. and one of them was actually about the hotel. And there is a limited number of players out there that are actually looking at this market, and it's actually whether it's a viable proposition for us. So we've considered that. Also, we've probably taken advice from a number of agents, and as you know, that in Weymouth, that we are a substantial owner of hotels, and so therefore we have got a good understanding of the hotel market. What's actually clear is that there are not a huge number of players that are looking for hotel investment at the moment. And those players, and to quote the guy, Henry Jackson, who's a partner at the Knight Franks Hotel Agency, investors are becoming increasingly focused on undertaking detailed, differentiated, robust and smarter due diligence and uncompromising on their investment criteria. And as such, that means that effectively the number of players looking for hotel space at the moment is limited. And actually then, in terms of what they might offer for it, whether that actually stacks up and is commercially viable for us.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. And I think a couple of the fact that I think the Section 151 officer has to get best value of money for any asset that Dorset Council have. So I can understand the arguments around the hotel position. Mr. Selgren, you want to come back?
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Rennie raised the point about a master plan. I don't know if we've still got Councillor Walsh on the call with us in the meeting, but if he doesn't come in and make the point himself, just to comment that the master plan is getting picked up as part of the wider Dorset Council local plan. So I might suggest, Chairman, there's a debate to be had around master planning, potentially some master planning for Dorchester, but that probably is more appropriately had as part of the local plan discussion rather than as part of consideration of this particular report.
Okay, thank you. That's Mr. Walsh, the officer.
Sorry, it's Councillor Walsh, the portfolio holder for planning, who was, of course,
okay.
on the call earlier.
I don't know if are you still here, Councillor Walsh? No.
Chairman, given he's not, I did receive a message from him earlier that I understood this question, this matter might be raised. So that had he been still with us on the meeting, that would have been the answer that he would have given. Also, that this is something that he would be very pleased to pick up with members as part of the local plan process.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Rennie, did you wish to come back on anything?
Sorry. No, I'm fine, thank you. I don't have anything else I wish to say. I understand the points made by the officers coming back to me. I still believe we should be doing more scrutiny on this. The more people probably will talk about this, the more I will understand there is a lot more information behind this. But I am sure, as chairman of Scrutiny, you would have been a lot happier if you'd seen it all.
Thank you, Councillor Rennie. And as I said, I believe this is it's an ongoing route to actually redeveloping or reshaping, reforming the authority in terms of our office strategy and the desk spaces that need. And I think this will continually come back to scrutiny at the various stages for us to have a look at. So I can now move to Councillor Jones.
Right. I think first of all, we've got to accept that County Hall is the only office large enough for all our staff. And as a Dorchester councillor, we do want our staff to stay and work in Dorchester and contribute to Dorchester. But the future of Southwarks House is a much more difficult decision. We don't want it left in mothballs for ages. We want something to happen to it. But when it was built, it was very controversial, and it was against the wishes of Dorchester councillors, who again, we weren't consulted before that happened. In fact, it was so unpopular that it led to a local referendum to change the West Dorset District Council's cabinet style system to a committee style. It was so controversial then. So this time around, I think we've got to involve people in its future, local people, in what's going to happen to it in the future. So can I have an assurance that, first of all, we need to talk to the 5 Dorchester councillors before cabinet meeting, because we have not been involved in this decision making at all. Secondly, that they will then talk to the Dorchester Town Council about their plans for the future. And then finally, we consult with Dorchester residents when we've got all the costed options. And I don't think talking to one hotel chain is what I call a costed option. We must remember we're talking here not about just the future of officers, but about the future of Dorchester Town Centre. Following the loss of so many workers coming into town every day, we want to have a future as a heritage tourist town. It's not just about money this time, it's about the future of livelihoods in Dorchester Town Centre and elsewhere in the county.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Ferrari, in terms of the discussion with the local ward members.
I'm very happy to have conversation. In fact, I've got a meeting fixed with Dorchester Town Council on early April. Can't remember the date exactly. So very happy to have those conversations. Can I make a general point? There is much debate about different potential uses of this building. This was a line item in the budget, and that generated much discussion with a variety of councillors about other prospective uses of the site. It was suggested to us that we might look to bring a government department here. We might have a sheltered block for the elderly. We looked at all of the options that were put on the table for us. The summary of where we are is that there is no demand for this sort of building. None of the routes that we followed result in anybody with any interest. Without going into the commercially confident sections, the offers that we have received would be best described as very poor. We have no commercially sensible options on the table. So we can talk at great length about lots of other options, but there are no buyers out there for this building. The route forward for this building is for us to take its future in our own control and develop it. Anything else that we do will simply end up postponing the decision, and I don't believe that there are any other options available to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferrari. Yes, I think with the COVID pandemic that we have at the moment, it's obviously restricted the amount of commercial avenues that are probably open to the council. I've got Mr. Selgren.
Sorry, can I come back on that point?
I've just had a request to speak from Mr. Selgren, and I'll come back to you, Councillor Jones.
Chairman, I just think it helpful just clarify. Clearly, members in this meeting will be only too well aware, but just conscious that members of the public and others viewing this meeting, I didn't want there to be any doubt. There might have been a suggestion. I know members weren't suggesting that, because quite rightly the call has been for more scrutiny, and of course scrutiny is a very important part of the council's governance process. But I think just particularly for members of the public attending this morning, it's important to clarify that this is not the first time this matter has come before scrutiny, or indeed had consideration in the public domain. So I just observed that scrutiny on the 29th of September last year considered the council's asset management strategy, and that report itself contained paragraphs not only on the council's wider office strategy process, but in specific reference to the Dorchester office estate. And similarly, that report came to Cabinet on the 20th of November. So again, similarly, those matters have been in the public domain. So just for clarity, I think it's very important for the public that whilst members clearly are asking whether there could be further scrutiny, I think it's just, Chairman, not to overlook the fact there has been some in the run-up to this morning's meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Selgren. Councillor Jones, you wish to come back?
Yeah, Councillor Ferrari talked then about how we have looked at this, we have looked at the other. The people who haven't looked at any of it are the 5 Dorchester councillors. This council has what is called a local member protocol, where anything which happens in their ward should be discussed or talked to by the local members. We have not been consulted or any discussion at all on any of these issues. It's nice that we're going to talk to Dorchester Town Council, but we need, the 5 Dorchester councils need to have a discussion before this comes to Cabinet meeting. So we need to discuss with Councillor Ferrari next week.
Thank you. And I think it was my understanding that Councillor Ferrari is happy to meet outside of this meeting.
Very.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I've got Councillor Fry.
Yeah, morning, Chair. Just want to say that a lot of what I agree with has already been said, but it's really a statement to sort of follow up Councillor Ferrari's comments on that, about there is no demand for this building. and this is more of a comment in the statement than anything, then how there's no demand for this building. So how did West Dorset Council get it so wrong in the face of all the opposition to build that building those years ago, when now they say there's no demand for it? That just appears to be really bad planning. But closing Southwarks House is a difficult decision. I believe it probably is the right decision, but as has already been said, I would like to see the Dorset councillors consulted and taken into account and considered their views in this process. It's been mentioned that there's been comment already in the September meeting and the November meeting, but those were comments. It wasn't actually, they were obviously overlooked or missed by some of us, myself included, and comments don't always end up as reality. But I do want us all to be part of any consultation going forward, please. And I note that Councillor Ferrari is coming to a meeting, I think it's on the 6th of April, but my concern is that's actually poorly timed, and actually we might need longer than the first half an hour or hour before a meeting. So I'll be taking that offline with him later on and my colleagues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Ferrari. Thank you.
Can I make a small general point, Chair?
Yeah, please do, Councillor Ferrari.
The officers are completely unable to comment on the operations of West Dorset District Council, and raising issues that were are beyond their scope and well beyond any of their time to comment on. I don't think are helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ferrari. I was going to make the point myself. Excuse me, Councillor Ferrari. That what the predecessor council did in a past history we're not responsible for it as a new Dorset council, and at back then nobody had a crystal ball as to the events and what was going to occur. So I think we have to deal with what we've got in front of us now. Councillor Ferrari.
Yeah, I totally accept that, and I agree that I do not disagree with those things. But in the public's eye, we're still councillors, we're still elected. And these decisions are difficult decisions which they will be unable to fathom with a good explanation of why one council can bring that to build that building, and then just a few simple years later on, it's found there's no demand for it. So somebody on that process, it's gone wrong, and we must make sure as fellow councillors now that we make sure we get the right decisions, that they stand the period of time and scrutiny.
Yeah, I understand your concerns and how the public may perceive it, but it's, as I said, we did at the time that the decision was taken. LGR wasn't really a definite. It wasn't definitely on the table, and I think that obviously things have moved on. History's moved on. The decision was taken to build the building. We've now had local government reorganisation, and we are where we are now. And there's a view or a committee paper in front of us as to whether we dispose of the site. I've now got Mr. Thompson who wishes to make a comment. Mr. Thompson.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just picking up on Councillor Jones's point, that whilst we might have only have one offer, it doesn't actually mean that we've just actually spoken to one person, and so therefore that's why we've actually had discussions with others, and also that's why we've actually been in discussion with our agents in a number of these sectors. Also, I think just picking up on some of the comments about office space. Well, clearly we recognise that actually the workforce is changing and the nature of work is changing, and that's why we've also suggested in this paper that we actually look at it as a public service hub as well. Already within County Hall, we have other entities working out of County Hall, and certainly with as we move forward, there might be other public sector bodies that want to use some of that space. So I think that really what we're saying is actually that even going forward, we recognise that we have some surplus capacity, and therefore what we need to do is actually ensure that we use the space and maximise the space, and actually ensure that we have other public bodies or third-party organisations that can actually share in that space and utilise it as well.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I've got Councillor Kimber to speak next. If there's no other members from across the chamber that wishes to speak, I'm going to then move into the committee debate with the committee members. So, Councillor Kimber.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I've got a few points I want to raise. First of all, I want to raise on the consultation. As the council knows, I was a trade union official before I came way back. And very often the consultations tend to be very management led. That's no disparity on what people are saying, but very often when I was doing that, undertaking that job, many members of the staff would come to me and say, well, this is what I was asked. It looks as though it was a foregone conclusion. I now have to work from home, or I have to work this way. It felt very often, it felt that wasn't a genuine enough consultation that reached down to the ordinary worker, the shop on the work. Now, that is one area I would like addressed. The other thing is, Councillor Jill Taylor is dead right about a massive amount of people that have to travel between Weymouth and, can I say the word, Portland, that travel up daily. And it seems as though we've really lost out in this partnership. To me, I think very much, you know, we should be looking at much better ways of travelling up to Dorchester. You know, the trains, so to speak. I'm still fighting on that one, but that's the point I wanted to make, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McIntosh. You wish to make comment?
Thank you, Chair. Just to emphasise the point that was already made about surveying the employees, we've done that extensively, and most of employees have told us that they can work from home more than 80% of their time. Now that's different from what they might wish to do, but that is the sort of the scope of the possibility. And when we said what would you like to do, most have said they would like a blend, and that sort of 50-50 sort of approach would work best for them. When we then consulted their managers, as has already been mentioned, no manager said that they needed a higher proportion of desks than that 5 to 10 ratio. Some said less, but no one said more. So that's why, as a starting point, we've come down on the 5 to 10. So it fits both with what managers have told us they need for their service, also fits with what employees have told us that they would be their preference. Clearly, there's always going to be exceptions, so we absolutely emphasise the point that not everyone can work from home. It doesn't work for all job roles, it doesn't work for all individuals, depending on circumstances. So nobody will be forced to work from home, but that is an option, and it's about opening up those possibilities, and that fluidity has been mentioned in terms of making the workplace more agile. People need to be where they need to be to best serve residents, customers, clients, and also find a better work-life balance for themselves. So it's all these things blended together, and that's what the Dorset workplace is essentially about. It's more about culture, it's more about work methods, it's more about technology than it is actually about offices, but clearly people need the offices at times to work out of. So Chairman, thank you for the opportunity to cover that off. We have also consulted throughout and communicated with trade union representatives in addition to directly with employees. In terms of the travel arrangements, I know Matthew Piles is present. I don't know, Chair, whether he might want to talk about the Council's travel plan.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McIntosh, for that update. Thank you. I'm not sure if Mr. Piles is in the room.
Chairman, I think perhaps John Selgren, perhaps not at the moment, but if it would help, I can invite him in if you would like. But that just may take a few minutes to achieve. I know he's attending to other things because, as you'll be aware, Chairman, he's leading on the summer opening preparations for us.
Yeah, he is. I dare say he's probably busy.
So, might have respect for just Chairman, if it's not urgent, and Councillor Kim will be happy for me to perhaps ask Matthew to follow that with Matthew Piles to follow that up with him outside the meeting, I'll happily do that.
Yeah. Thank you very much, John. I would welcome that. And just to say that point from David, no employer will be forced to work from home, or that's worth noting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kimber. Okay, I've got no other members from across the chamber that wish to speak, so I'm going to move into the committee debate now. Okay, so my first to speak is Councillor Canning.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think the first thing I want to say is that one of the most frustrating things in life as a local councillor, both on this authority and on previous authorities, is to not be consulted and not to be involved in things going on in your own patch. I'm sure members, regardless of their political persuasions, have all had experiences of being overlooked, of not being given information and not involved in things the way they should be involved with them. And I think it's one of those times, after both, in this case specifically with the Dorchester members not being consulted about the future of the offices in Dorchester, which obviously have a huge economic and social impact on the town. But after also the car parking stage 1 situation before at the end of last year, when again members were surprised to find out car parking changes released in a press release rather than actually be told what was going on in their particular areas. Now, things have got better on the car parking front, I hope and believe, but I think it's an appropriate time that we should restate the importance of members being told what's going on in their areas and being consulted and involved within plenty of time of reports being made and decisions being taken. So today I'd like to move an amendment to the recommendation that's on the paper, which I think Lindsay, I said to Lindsay, so I hope you can put it up in a minute. If I just talk to that amendment, firstly, I'd say I have no problem at all with the proposal to concentrate on County Hall. I think it is the logical way forward. It saves money for this authority and gets rid of the buildings that are surplus to requirements. So I have no problems with that at all. The second point is on the agenda about utilising spare space and inviting in third-party sector people. Again, no problem with that at all. Keeping the library in place, again, no problem at all. But I think we need to go further. I think, firstly, as I said, we need to reaffirm that local members should be consulted on issues in their wards and not find out about things too late in the day to have any impact on them whatsoever. I also request that we formally note that we need a town centre master plan in Dorchester. Some people pointed out that it's a bit strange that just having just finished the consultation period on the local plan, the council then goes and announces what it's going to do with its buildings. It seems a bit the wrong way around, really. And in fact, if you read the current version of the local plan, it actually contradicts what we're trying to do with our offices in terms of turning them into residential properties. That's not included in the current local plan at all. So what we recognise is that there needs to be a Dorchester Town Centre master plan, and I certainly welcome the comments that were made earlier on by John Selgren that this was going to happen. But I think it should be formally recorded that process needs to happen, because it's not just what we're doing in our buildings, it's also the CCG doing the same process. It's also some of the buildings that we've vacated, such as Princess House, are likely to come onto the market soon for exactly the same purpose. And people need to know what is the future of our town centre, because the choices we're making in the next few weeks make a huge difference to the ongoing economic position of Dorchester. And finally, I think as Councillor Rennie said, there is still more investigations to be done. I think there's still more to be looked at the hotels than has been said today. I think for those of us who really care about the economic life and vibrancy of the town, a hotel has to be still on the agenda as something that the town needs to improve its nighttime economy and to deal with the future that we all face and the challenges we face. But the other side of things is that the reports, certainly as I read them in the confidential section, I don't think I'm going to say anything controversial here, seem very biased towards looking at the situation that the affordable housing should be 65% commercial and 35% affordable, or something approaching those sorts of figures. So that is the council's policy in the plan, local plan, and previously, and that's quite understandable. But we, as a local authority, have a responsibility for housing, and we know how dire the waiting lists are and the problems are with housing. So I think there's a strong case to actually look at there being a case for having 100% affordable housing on all the sites that the council is looking to deal with. And I think that needs to be investigated, or if not 100%, sort of a very high percentage, but more than this is the 35% that is the standard approach. And I think there's work to be done there as well. And that is why I've made the suggestions I have made in this amendment to the report. I hope most of it is broadly acceptable to people, actually. It's not meant to be controversial. It's meant to just state the kinds of things the Dorchester councillors would have said if we'd been consulted properly. And we may not have needed to get to this point of actually putting down amendments in committee meetings. We might have been able to sort this out well beforehand. But I hope members from all sides of the chamber will be able to support what I put on the paper there today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Canning.
Oh, perhaps just one factual point. The reason why in point 4 it talks about the overview committee is I consulted with Jonathan Mayer about what would be the most appropriate committee to look into this going forwards, and he said the overview committee would be his recommendation and not the scrutiny committee. Otherwise, it would have said otherwise.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Canning. So this is a proposal to replace all of the recommendations that are in the report and replace them with these recommendations that you've put before
That
us.
is correct, though the points 1 and 2 are actually exactly the same as what the points 1 and 2 are on the paper. So really it's only points 3 onwards that change.
Okay, so could I ask, do you have a seconder?
I certainly hope so. Maria?
Is there any member of the committee who wishes to
Yes,
second?
I'll second it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Okay, I've got a request to speak from Mr. Selgren.
Chairman, just might I observe on 5 that's on the screen before you, this is the proposed amendment in relation to the production of a master plan as part of the local plan process. Can I just observe that the second part of that perhaps is rather directive in what it says to a plan process, which obviously follows a statutory process, openness and all of those things. Again, you may want to take some advice, Mr. Mayor, on the matter as well. But my recommendation to you from my position would be that you perhaps consider just ending the sentence that prioritise the production of a Dorchester Town Centre master plan. Stop, and then don't go on perhaps to seek to direct the planning process.
If Mr. Mayor agrees with that suggestion, then I would be quite happy to support that, changing that. Yes.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
Chairman, I support the director's suggestion on that point. Chairman, while I'm speaking, can I mention the point that we've been covering just in a discussion between ourselves and Lindsay, that you are coming up to 3 hours on this meeting. Standing orders require that if you reach the 3-hour mark without resolving on the point, then the meeting would have to be adjourned. So I think we need a specific resolution from the committee to continue beyond 1 o'clock. And my advice would always be that you try to set a time limit on that, so not to carry on in an open-ended manner, but try to reach an end to the meeting within a reasonable time. So I suggest that you don't go beyond 2 o'clock.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, as Mr. Mayor alluded to, we've had a quick conversation within the chat bar about my concerns that we are approaching the 1 o'clock deadline with 3 hours will be up. So could I have someone to propose that we suspend standing orders and that we continue the meeting to not go beyond 2 o'clock? Could I have a member of the committee?
Can I suggest that, but say 1:45, because several of us do have another meeting at 2 o'clock. So it would be nice to have a small break.
I'd like to propose that we continue to 1:45, please, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Tuckneck. There's a proposal. Can I have a seconder, please?
Yes, I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. So unless I hear any dissent from the committee, can I take it that that is approved? Thank you, members. Does that satisfy you, Mr. Mayor, that we can continue to 1:45?
Kevin, that's great, thank you. And on the point that you were discussing before we came to that, and the suggestion that the director had made that the amendment number 5 should be shortened. Yes, I do fully support that.
Okay, well, I'm happy to agree to those words being removed and the sentence finishing after the word master plan.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman, it's Lindsay. Can I just check that the seconder of the proposer, Councillor Rowe, is also happy with that?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. So I did have a list of members that wish to speak, but now I will ask if there are any members that wish to speak to the proposals that have been put forward by Councillor Canning. Got nothing in the chat. Oh yeah, Councillor Parks.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think it's probably going to cover the same points I was going to speak about anyway when I asked originally for a request to speak. I just feel that we're going around the houses a little bit on this. This has been through scrutiny, as Mr. Selgren has already pointed out. It was also part of the budget discussions and has been before Cabinet as well. So I think it's unfair to say that members haven't been consulted, but I do accept the fact that Dorchester members specifically feel they haven't been consulted. And I think that's probably a lesson to learn moving forward to this. However, I do believe that we need to move forward with the efficiencies that we've spoken about for most of the morning. This isn't all about Dorchester. Yes, this specific issue is around the Dorchester building, but we mustn't get hung up on the fact that all the predecessor councils made decisions around their assets and buildings. We cannot keep dwelling on the past. I could sit here and talk all day about things that went on in East Dorset that I perhaps don't agree with. We're 2 years down the line from LGR. We need to move on. I think it would absolutely abhorrent if we put delays into this by putting a task and finish group in place. As Councillor Ferrari pointed out, this is £1,500 a day. Can we really justify to the residents of Dorset that this is the right decision to make to put more delays on this process? Therefore, I cannot support any of the amendments that Councillor Canning has made.
Okay, Councillor Parks, unless I have other direction from Mr. Mayor, I'm going to take these recommendations when we come to vote. I'm going to take them individually because they're a mix of what was formerly within the officer's report and the paper that come before us and new recommendations that have come from Councillor Canning. So I am intending to take them all separately, unless Mr. Mayor can advise otherwise. Okay, so I've got Councillor Roberts to speak next.
Thank you, Chairman. The last time we were asked to change a recommendation, it was no longer an amendment. Perhaps you can clarify that this is an amendment, because the original proposal wasn't. No one had proposed the recommendation, so I'd just like clarification on that. But I would like to make, rather like Mike Parks, I was a member of West Dorset for 17 years, and I would like to correct Councillor Fry. It was built as council offices, not as a potential sale. And I think it was very disingenuous to suggest that it was wrongly built. It was built with a purpose. If he had occupied Stratton House, as I did for all those years, with 84 rooms on 17 levels and only one available for disabled access, he would understand very well why we needed new offices. The fact that we have moved forward, I may commend him to investigate why Bridport, at great expense, built a new police station that is now mothballed. I would leave that in his court. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Ms Watson, I think you're going to give us some clarity over this. I think we're in the same position we were with the previous agenda item.
Yeah, absolutely, exactly the same position. What you have before you is an officer recommendation. Therefore, at the beginning of the debate, there is no motion.
I think they're going to. I'll eat whenever they stop and pull out because it's going.
Can you please turn your microphone off?
15-minute break.
Sorry, Ms Watson, carry on.
Okay, let me just start again though. So what you have in the report is an officer recommendation. So therefore, at the beginning of your debate, you don't have anything on the table in terms of anything proposed and seconded. What Councillor Canning has done is put a recommendation forward that has been seconded. So what you are talking about is the recommendation on your screen now has been proposed and seconded. It is not an amendment because there was no proposal on the table in the first place. It was an officer recommendation. So same as before, this is what you're voting on. And when you go through them, however you do it, you either vote for or against them.
Or abstain.
Yeah,
Or
thank you, Ms Watson.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think that answers your point. Councillor Roberts, is there anything you wish to come back on? Councillor Roberts?
I've made the mistake of being muted. I'm rather disturbed, Chairman, that you hadn't asked for a proposal on the recommendation before allowing the so-called amendment to be read out. There wasn't an opportunity for any of us to propose the recommendation and therefore to make it an amendment that could be voted on separately. And I'm troubled, as in the last time, that we either have the choice of a total rejection of all of this because we did not have the opportunity to propose and second the officer recommendation and it then to be amended.
Mr. Mayor, would you like to clarify it? My understanding is that a councillor could come in and make the proposal for the recommendations as was done.
Chairman, I think that's right, but I think you need a practical way forward. My suggestion is that you take when we reach that point, the proposal from Councillor Canning that was seconded. You can take that if members wish to, either as 6 individual parts, or you can take it on block. And depending on whether those proposals stand or fall, we might need to revert to the officer recommendations that were in the report in front of you. But I think you will need to come to a vote on those 6 parts, and it's for members to come to a view on whether you're happy to vote on block or individually.
Okay, well, my intention from the chair was to take them individually, Mr. Mayor. Are you content with that?
Perfectly, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I move to Councillor Took, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to discuss the history of Southwarks House. That's dead and gone. We have 6 items before us. I'd just like to quickly run through the 6, if I may. The first 2 don't appear to be any different to the first 2 that we already have. And the idea here is that we'll consolidate the council's office requirements and the principle of utilising surplus space within County Hall for use by third sector. And I don't think those 2 are at all controversial. We also, point 3 is to agree to retain the library facility in Southwarks House with a customer access point, which is pretty much in line with the original officer recommendation. What we've got slight changes is establishing a task and finish group with a remit to further investigate the repurposing of Southwarks House. It says to include the establishment of a hotel and maximising the number and variety of affordable homes. To include, amongst other things, I have no problem with that. We certainly need to have something that's going to come to a decision as to the way forward. And it strikes me that a Place and Resources Overview Committee, at least a task and finish group, would establish that. And that may well go with the recommendation of residential use through refurbishing, which is as per the officer recommendation. But all that this proposal seems to be doing is to say, rather than just saying it's residential, we've decided, is there may be more things to look at. But to look at fairly quickly, I would suggest. I don't think this needs to take weeks. It needs to be something that can be set up fairly quickly, and then look at the proposals, a lot of which are in the confidential elements of this meeting. Number 5, request the team working on a local plan prioritise the production of Dorset Town Centre Master Plan. Yeah, that's something that needs doing, and I'd be happy to do that. I'm not a Dorchester councillor, far from it indeed, about as far as you can get, frankly. But I don't have a problem with that, and especially if we simply stop it at full stop master plan full stop, and then as was recommended earlier. And in terms of number 6, reaffirming the principle we're a member-led authority and that local members should always be consulted on issues affecting their wards. I agree with that. I think we should. Whether it's relevant to this, to going forward with this, I think it's a substantial point that is generic and might be worth reaffirming in toto as a holistic principle rather than just in relation to this one. And maybe it would come back to either scrutiny or possibly overview to say that we are member-led, and that's not officer-led or even cabinet-led, it's member-led. And certainly on issues affecting members' wards, we need to make sure those members are fully consulted. But thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Took. Councillor Shortell.
Thank you, Chairman. A little bit confused, really. Is there a possibility, now you've got a proposal and a seconder on the table, to actually put an amendment in to reinstate the original recommendations as laid out by the officer? Can that be done as a recommendation over and above the existing proposal which has been seconded?
No, I believe it can only be done if when these recommendations are voted on, if they fail, but Ms Watson will clarify that.
Yeah, just to say you can't make an amendment which will negate the motion that's on the table. You would have to vote on this motion and it would have to fail in order to then put another motion on the table.
Thank you. Does that satisfy you, Councillor Shortell? Okay. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm unable to bring up the original recommendation. Is it technically possible to put it alongside so that we can actually compare the changes?
Ms Watson, is that possible? I think 1 and 2 are basically the same.
Yes, Chairman, I think we can go back to the cover of the report. Are you able to do that, Lily? We can sort of go between them. I think, like you say, the first 3 are very similar, and then it's the additional recommendations. I think I'm right in saying.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Have I got any other members that wish to speak to the report or ask questions of the report? Councillor Canning.
Sorry, can I just make one other point that I didn't mention earlier on? It's been spoken about the speed and the need to move quickly, and I do quite appreciate that. But there is perhaps slightly more time than is appreciated, because there will need to be work done at County Hall to make it up to date and modern enough to be moved into. For example, the committee room suite, the technology that's behind running that, the reception area. I think in the report as well, it refers to the former judicial area of County Hall. All need quite a bit of work doing to them before councillors can move in. And so it's inevitable that if we do go back to having physical meetings later on this summer or early autumn, the chances are they'll have to be in Southwark House while other work is done in County Hall anyway. So it may be that we're not under quite as much rush as some people have said.
Okay, thank you. Is there an officer wishes to comment on that?
Chairman, if I may comment.
Thompson, thank you.
As Councillor Canning said, that yes, there might be some upgrades of some facilities that we need to do. I think the issue here is actually our requirement, I suppose, of what we were looking to do was actually to be able to move this into a planning process, and so that we could actually move that forward quicker and sooner rather than later.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Canning, is that okay?
Sure, I understand that, but clearly, yeah, fine, yeah.
Okay. Okay. Councillor Robins, you seconded the recommendation. Did you want to come back and speak?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I've got no other questions from no other members in the chat bar, so I think I'm going to move to voting on the recommendations. We're going to take them singly. So I think we're going to have to do all these through a roll call. Ms Watson.
Sorry, can you bear with me one moment, because I wasn't set up for numerous phone calls.
That's
so
perfectly okay. Don't worry.
just bear with me one moment. Okay, right.
Just before we start, Ms. Watson,
Yeah.
Mr. Selgren, if I remember correctly, earlier in when the debate was going on, you said that when we vote for these recommendations, it may be that we need to return to the original recommendation to pick something up from there.
I think, Chairman, that was Mr. Mayor's advice to you.
I beg your pardon, Mr. Mayor. Okay.
Chairman, that was simply my advice. Depending on how this vote goes, we might be left with a gap where there's no position of the Scrutiny Committee, and we might need someone to move that you go back to one of the recommendations in the original report.
Thank you. I'll be guided by you if we come to that point. Thank you. So, are you ready, Ms. Watson?
Yeah. Did you want me to sort of read the recommendation, then do the vote? How did you want to do it?
I was going to read the recommendation and.
Okay, so if you do them one at a time, then I'll do the vote.
Okay. So, members of the committee, the first recommendation: to agree to the principle of consolidating the council's office requirements on the County Hall Colton Park site as a public surface civic hub, subject to the council ensuring that it takes due regard to the requirements of the Equality Act 2010.
Okay, I'm going to go through the roll call, and if you could answer either for, against, or abstain. Councillor Bartlett.
For.
Councillor Canning.
For.
Councillor Parks.
For.
Councillor Adkins.
For.
Councillor Trite.
For.
Councillor Shortell.
For.
Councillor Roberts.
For.
Councillor Rowe.
For.
Councillor Took.
For.
Councillor Heatley.
For.
That's unanimous, Chairman.
Okay. So we've moved to recommendation 2. Agree to the principle of utilising any surplus space within the County Hall Colton Park site for use by third sector and other party sector bodies, and to review the possibility to repurpose and refurbish any such assets currently leased to and in use by them for residential purpose or for disposal.
Okay, this is again either for, against, or abstain. Councillor Bartlett.
For.
Councillor Canning.
For.
Councillor Parks.
For.
Councillor Adkins.
For.
Councillor Trite.
For.
Councillor Shortell.
For.
Councillor Roberts.
For.
Councillor Rowe.
For.
Councillor Took.
For.
Councillor Heatley.
For.
That is unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you. Recommendation 3. Agreed to retain the library facility in South Walks House with a customer access point.
Okay, Councillor Bartlett.
For.
Councillor Canning.
For.
Councillor Parks.
For.
Councillor Adkins.
For.
Councillor Trite.
For.
Councillor Shortell.
For.
Councillor Roberts.
Against.
Councillor Rowe.
For.
Councillor Took.
For.
Councillor Heatley.
For.
Okay, that is carried, Chair.
Thank you. Recommendation 4. Support Places and Resources Overview Committee establishing a task and finish group remit to further investigate the repurposing of South Walks House and South Annex to include the establishment of a hotel and maximising the number and variety of affordable homes.
Okay, Councillor Bartlett.
Against.
Councillor Canning.
For.
Councillor Parks.
Against.
Councillor Adkins.
Against.
Councillor Trite.
Against.
Councillor Shortell.
Against.
Councillor Roberts.
Against.
Councillor Rowe.
For.
Councillor Took.
For.
Councillor Heatley.
For.
That was 6 against and 4 for. So that fails.
Thank you. And item 5, and while it's on your screen, obviously we've deleted the latter part of this, so it just reads, request the team working on the new local plan prioritise the production of a Dorchester Town Centre master plan.
Okay, Councillor Bartlett.
For.
Councillor Canning.
For.
Councillor Parks.
Against.
Councillor Adkins.
Against.
Councillor Trite.
Against.
Councillor Shortell.
Against.
Councillor Roberts.
Against.
Councillor Rowe.
For.
Councillor Took.
For.
Councillor Heatley.
Against.
That was 6 against and 4 for, so that one fails too.
Thank you. And number 6, recommendation 6, reaffirms the principle that we are a member-led authority and the local members should always be consulted on issues affecting their boards.
Okay, Councillor Bartlett.
For.
Councillor Canning.
For.
Councillor Parks.
Abstain.
Councillor Adkins.
For.
Councillor Trite.
For.
Councillor Shortell.
Abstain.
Councillor Roberts.
Abstain.
Councillor Rowe.
For.
Councillor Took.
For.
Councillor Heatley.
For.
That was 7 for, so that's gone passes.
Thank you, Ms Watson. If I can now go back to Mr Mayor, if there's something that we've missed out that was within the original recommendations that we need to address now.
Chairman, I'm just reading across between the two, and we've just lost the so we've just Lindsay, could you put the other 6 back on the screen, please? Yeah, so I think what we've lost is the original recommendation 3 from the officer report about the seeking of planning permission, if I'm right, Chairman.
Okay.
So what I suggest, Chairman, is if there is a member who is prepared to move original recommendation 3, and if it's seconded, you could go to a vote on seeking planning permission to repurpose South Forks House if members think that's appropriate.
Okay, I've got Mr Selgren who wishes to speak.
Chairman, just confirm from a professional point of view. So, Marching Officer is correct about the consequence of that proposed amendment. Might I suggest, Chairman, that you might want to consider asking Mr Thompson if he just explained to members what the consequence either way of making that change would be, so that in taking a decision on this matter, members have at least been advised on the consequence of either course of action.
Certainly, Mr Thompson.
Yeah, certainly. What that does actually is give us the ability to take the proposal to planning and get planning consent to the change of use to actually a residential for a residential purpose. Clearly, that beyond that, we would actually probably need to seek further approval in terms of the way that we do that, and so therefore it would probably need to go back to Cabinet in terms of the actual delivery model for achieving that. Okay, so I think that what it does is actually bring us to a point where we've actually got the option, we know that it's approved, and then obviously that what it then does is that we then need to look at the delivery model and the economics and probably seek a separate decision in relation to proceeding with that.
Okay, thank you, Mr Thompson. I suspect we're going to need some officer help in formulating the words here, but I'll go to Councillor Parks first.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm quite happy to propose that we accept recommendation 3 of the officer report to seek planning permission for both Southwarks House and the South Annex.
And Chairman, I'm happy to second that.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Okay, Mr. Mayor, are you content with that?
Chairman, I think that's the next logical step, is for members then to go to a vote on that.
Thank you. So members who wish to speak on this, I've got Councillor Took.
Thank you, Chair. A very brief question. My understanding was that offices can be converted to residential under permitted development rights rather than having to have planning permission. Am I correct in that, or am I wrong? And I'm simply asking it as a straightforward question.
I can answer that. Councillor Took, you're absolutely correct that the offices could be converted under permitted development rights, but we still need to seek and take that through to planning for them to review the scheme and of that nature. South Annex would actually have to be a formal planning application. But obviously what that does is still that coming out of that, there is then the commercial arrangements and we would need to seek approval separately in terms of proceeding further with that that proposal.
Okay,
so planning permission would be a good thing, but we need more information on the actual proposals at a later date as they come through. That's what you're saying?
That's correct.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
I think South Annex needs planning permission because it hasn't been in office since 2013.
That's correct.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. But I also believe that planning law is changing on that, isn't it? As well, there's something in the mix. I thought I read.
That's correct as well, but obviously that hasn't actually been granted. So so effectively at this moment in time, South Annex would be subject to a planning application, and it's probably not thought until maybe later in the summer there will be greater clarity on that. So probably our view at this moment in time is that we would seek separate planning in terms of South Annex.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Thank you. Do I have any members who wish to speak on effectively what is the original recommendation in the report number 3? Okay. So, so the proposer, Councillor Parks, did you wish to say anything at this point, or can I go straight to the vote?
Nothing further. Happy for you to go to the vote, Chairman.
Okay, members. So if we could go to the vote, please, on recommendation 3, which was to agree to the council seeking planning permission to repurpose Southwarks House and South Annex for residential use through a process of refurbishing or redeveloping the existing buildings whilst retaining the library facility in Southwarks House and a customer access point. And I think Ms Watson will have to go for another roll call, please, for a vote.
Okay, no problem. Okay, Councillor Bartlett.
4.
Councillor Canning.
4.
Councillor Parks.
4.
Councillor Adkins.
4.
Councillor Trite.
4.
Councillor Shortell.
4.
Councillor Roberts.
4.
Councillor Rowe.
4.
Councillor Took.
4.
Councillor Heatley.
4.
That is unanimous, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Ms Watson. Okay, so that finishes agenda item 9. So we move to agenda item 10, urgent items, of which there aren't any. And agenda item 11 was exempt business, which we didn't need to go into, thankfully. So members of the committee, thank you very much. Thank you to all of the officers for the reports that you've given and for your presence and for the great value that you've brought to the meeting. And can I thank all members across the chamber as well for their attendance as well and their input as well. Okay, and on that, I'm going to close the meeting at 27 minutes past 1. Ms Watson.
Well done, Councillor Bartlett.
Okay.